Testing, testing, testing. Jesus. Jesus. Testing, testing, testing. All right, we're live. It's working. We be working. Yeah. I guess I'm just gonna. What's that? And then where's the chat box? Pull that out again. View. Wait, where is it? Docs. Chat. There you go. Chitty chat chat. All right, where am I gonna put this actually? Actually put it over here. I don't know. Yeah, there we go. All right. Cool. Let's continue this.
Design, or it's actually not on the design, but in the video, we want the tint of our tab bar to be green just to kind of go with the overall style. And if you do it here and use the tab bar appearance, it's going to make it like app wide. So let's do UI tab bar dot appearance. Again,
Let's go back a little bit.
okay, so we have our source controllers kind of refactored. So let's delete these two up here. We no longer need those. Now we just need to kind of refactor out this tab bar initialization. So let's do that as well down here. Slide up here. So func create tab.
All right, there we go. What am I gonna do here? Oh. How many options can I have? Let's see. What's another? Wait. Let's just do a fun poll, just for shits and giggles. Can I even? I can't. I can't vote in my own poll. No. Can I pin this? Message. Yeah, there we go. Yep. Cool. Cool.
Bar, and then we're just going to pass in this function to the root view controller of the window. So this is going to return a UI tab bar controller.
You know what? I'm gonna quickly set up some chill music. Oh, hey man. Well, not a ton. I wouldn't say a ton. I'm only on like the second the second video yeah, 3/4 of the way through. I'm not too far. Like I haven't done anything properly except like kind of. It's technically still set up. So yeah. um, one sec. I'm just gonna set up some very chill music to go with this, so it's not just like nothingness in the background of my stream. I want to add actually. Oh, so this is actually an app that's like it's related to GitHub, so you can make like it's it displays a list of followers, and then when you tap them, it shows like their profile and stuff. So kind of um like just tapping into a follower section on any like social media app, pretty much. I think that's kind of the idea of what's being built here, or what I'm about to build with the guidance of this course. Where's my music playlist here? Oh shit, I gotta turn on do not disturb mode when I do this. Stream breeze chill. This will work, but I want new streams here. Where was that one that I recently saved? Oh, there it is. Add to stream breeze chill. All right, let's go play this. Shuffle. I don't know if this audio is gonna actually come through. No, it's not. Yeah, it is actually. I'm really looking forward to making this app. Apparently I'm learning like I have to. It's well, I think I said yesterday like this course is like a little bit old. There's gonna be updates. Like it's up. He updated it, but I'm gonna be refactoring later. So I'm sort of learning the first version of Swift, which was used with UI kit, which kind of I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I'm conflicted. I'm like, I kind of don't want to learn it, but at the same time, I'm like, well, it'd actually be useful if I need to refactor someone else's project. If I'm gonna get a job, I know what I'm looking at, so that's kind of pushing me to be more interested in doing this course here. What is okay. Is that music here? Hey, why doesn't my music work? Oh, it does. There you go. Wait, what? It just stopped. Huh? What is going on with my music? Oh, it was just a song that ended, but it was like way early. What the hell? Turn the music down here, but I'll turn it up here. Be a little more difficult, but probably with it. Yeah, definitely thinking it's gonna be worth it to learn this. Plus, it's not like it's gonna be, refactored later, so I'll see how to do it. That's gonna be cool. if it wasn't going to be refactored, I think I'd probably be going for another course, but I'm glad that he did that here. Is the music too loud? Or is it like too quiet or something? Because it's... Is that okay? Maybe a little bit less. Oh, shoot. Maybe there. Okay. I think that's pretty good. Okay, sweet. Thanks.
And then let's go ahead and yank this code out because this is what we're going to kind of use up here. So delete that code, bring it back down here, paste it. So we do want a tab bar to be that, and then we're going to start configuring this tab bar. Before we throw in the view controllers, we want to configure this with the tint color because we want...
Oh, why is it so hot in here? Oh my god. Time for some air conditioning. Yo.
If you saw in the design, or it's actually not on the design, but in the video, we want the tint of our tab bar to be green just to kind of go with the overall style. And if you do it here and use the tab bar appearance, it's going to make it like app wide. So let's do UI. Oh.
App wide. Yeah, I'll be live for a while. Yep. I'm gonna be working on this for a little while.
UI tab bar dot appearance. Again, so appearance is like overall. Appearance, we're going to do this again with like navigation controller too. Dot tint color, and that's going to equal dot system green.
Geez, this is so different from what I
And
used
now
to.
we just need to initialize this tab bar with our view controllers, except now we don't have those variables of search NC and favorites NC. So this is where we're going to call these functions that we created here, and they're going to create those. So now we're going to do create search navigation controller and create favorites navigation controller. And
It's
you can
pretty
probably,
awesome. I set this up myself. So
this.
proud.
Just because these long names, like I try to not do those when I need.
All right, no worries. Thanks, man.
So again, create search NC. If we're going to use NC and VC, let's be consistent for abbreviations. So create search NC, create favorites NC. And let's just, because these are very long names, unnecessarily long. Sometimes a long name is fine because it's very descriptive, and shortening it would make it confusing. That's not the case here. So now the last thing we want is to return that UI tab bar controller. So return tab bar. And then now, so here again, we have the function that creates our navigation controllers. We're using those functions to create our tab bar. And then now up here, instead of just passing in tab bar, now we can do just create tab bar. It will run all those other functions. So again, we've refactored that out of this will connect a scene, because again, this is a very important, this may be a bad analogy. It's almost like the viewed load of like your whole app, right? So I like to keep this clean and not super cluttered. That's why I moved all this code out of there into its own functions. So now when we run it, we should see the tab bar with the icons and the titles, and it should be looking good. Okay, so here's our search screen, the system pink. You can see the tab bar is there with the search and the green tint. We tap on favorites. Now that gets the green tint in blue. So there we...
Let's see how we did. It's kind of weird. There's no background for the tab bar, but because it's like ignoring the safe area. But I didn't set that up. I did exactly as he said, so I don't know. It's just, I guess it's just like that. Whatever. What can you do?
Have it. Our foundation of the navigation is all set up. And again, I know I've said this before, but I want to repeat it. It's the Russian doll analogy, right? Where you have the tab bar controller that holds two navigation controllers. For example, when I click on search, I'm looking at the search navigation controller. When I click on favorites, I'm looking at the favorites navigation controller. They're two separate things. And a navigation controller is essentially, I look at it like a deck of cards. Like if you imagine a stack of deck of cards, but each card is a view controller. So whenever you push a new view onto the stack, view controller onto the stack, you're basically putting a new card on top of the deck of cards, and that's the one you see, whatever's on top. And then when you go back, you're popping off that view controller, or that top card of the deck of cards, to reveal the view controller underneath it. That's what's happening when you're going back and you're pushing new views on. And so like a view controller can only have a navigation controller may only have two view controllers in it, or it could have 20, right? So that's the stack. And that's also, if you understood what I just said, how you're just like popping and pushing on top of a stack, like that is like the data structure, a stack, kind of in a nutshell. But that's how navigation controllers work. So you kind of see that Russian doll analogy, where it's just containers holding containers. So hopefully that cleared up a bit. What I did say I was going to do is I was going to blow it up so you could really see it. I almost forgot to do this. The coolest part of the video, almost forgot to do it. So down here in Xcode, there's this debugger here, this view debugger, where it will pull up your app while it's running. It has to be running to do this. And if you see this, it doesn't look like much. If you understood what I just said, how you're just like popping and pushing on top of a stack, like that is like the data structure, a stack, kind of in a nutshell. But that's how navigation controllers work. So you kind of see that Russian doll analogy, where it's just containers holding containers. So hopefully that cleared up a bit. What I did say I was going to do is I was going to blow it up so you could really see it. I almost forgot to do this. The coolest part of the video, almost forgot to do it. So down here in Xcode, there's this debugger here, this view debugger, where it will pull up your app while it's running. It has to be running to do this. And if you see this, it doesn't look like much. But if you grab it and spin it, like, wow, now your views are popping out. And there's this little
Whoa!
slider down here that can like pop out the views more in the lower left. And you can hit this plus button to zoom in, zoom out. Let me get rid of this bottom part so it's kind of, I can zoom in a little bit to show you. But here you can see in the upper left, you see you have our scene back here. You have the UI tab bar controller, which is holding the UI navigation controller. And this is the favorites navigation controller. And then it is holding the favorites list VC. So again, tab bar controller holds navigation controller, which holds the view controllers. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can kind of see that. This view is also great for debugging. You know, if you're building a screen and you can't figure out like what's going on with the view, oftentimes it's behind another view. So again, this debugger tool is very, very useful for debugging complex UIs, but it also illustrates very nicely how these views are nested within each other. So hope
Damn.
that all made sense. On to the next video.
Okay, let's move on. How do we get out of this?
We left off last video getting the navigational foundation built for our app. As you can see here, we have the favorites tab and the search tab. What we're going to start the process of now is actually building this search screen that you see currently on the screen. But if you look on the screen, like we have that green button at the bottom, and then if I pull up the user info screen, you see we reuse those buttons. So what we're going to do in this video is start creating some reusable components. We're going to create a button that we're going to reuse, and then we're also going to create a custom text field that has that text field all formatted, even though currently in the app, that is the only place that text field is used. So I like to do that, even if it's only used in one place. I still like to make it an object, and the reason being is it yanks that stylization code out of the view controller. And two, just what I found in my career, you know, it's good to make things reusable because you never know when you're going to need to use that. You know, maybe the product people come in and they want a new screen and it has a bunch of text fields and you already got that taken care of. So those are the reasons I like to do that. And throughout the app, we're going to be creating a bunch of custom components like this, and this is kind of just the first taste of it. So let's get to it. Let's build the button first. So again, do Command N to pull up a new file. We're going to do a Cocoa Touch class. Next, make sure it's a UI button. Remember, you might have to change it from UI view controller or another one. And I'm going to name this GF button. And I'm going to talk about this prefix real quick and why I like to do this. This is actually a very common practice. Some people like it, some people are against it, but the reason being is it identifies it as something we have created, and GF stands for GitHub followers, by the way. That's the name of the app. But for example, Aluna, the company I work for, we do everything AL. Sometimes in my tutorials, I do SA button, like Sean Allen button. In Facebook, you'll see FB this. So the idea is to let it know that you built that here internally. So you know that, hey, GF button, that's an internal button. We built that. Because sometimes when you bring in, frame.
Quick question for myself. What is Cocoa Touch class versus a Swift file? Is it the older way of coding in Swift and Xcode and UIKit? What's the Cocoa Touch framework? Fundamental structure behavior. Right. Right. Okay. Interesting. All right, let's
Or
continue.
third-party libraries, they have their own components, so hopefully they name it something that is easily identifiable. Unfortunately, as much as I love Lottie, they named like their animation view that does the animations just animation view, right? You can see how that could potentially collide with maybe an animation view that you wrote internally if you're not tagging it with your little code like GF. So again, that's just a common practice. I like it. It's easily identifiable. Some people may not. We're going to be naming all our custom stuff GF fill in the blank. So that's why we
GF
do that. So hit
girlfriend.
next, and we should have our, save it, create it, I'm sorry. And we have our blank GF button. As always, we get rid of the comments and we start from scratch here. So let's scroll up a little bit. No, we can't. So the first thing you need here is your init methods. So if you start typing init, you're going to get some autocomplete. And here's the default initializer with the frame, because you're initializing a button like, with the frame, like how big it is. Anytime you're overriding, so because this is a subclass of UI button, right? We're creating our own subclass of UI button called GF button. We have to override the initializer if we're going to do custom stuff in it, which we are. If we weren't doing any custom configuration, we wouldn't have to override the init because there's nothing going on here. So how you make sure you always call the default one is by calling the super. So super.init. Super basically means, and then we want to initialize it with the frame that we pass in. Super basically means we're calling the superclass or the parent. So by what happens in this function is we're calling the normal init method that is on UI button. Like we're making sure all that happens first. So everything Apple built into the default UI button, we're calling that, and then we're doing our custom code in here, right? So it's kind of like whenever you subclass an object, you're kind of building on top of the existing object.
Um,
For example, we're
do you mean which what do you mean exactly, Kasim? Like I'm using Mac OS, is that what you're asking me? OS? Mac OS and Xcode.
building our GF button on top of UI button. Another way to flip that is that like GF button is like a child class of the parent class UI button. We're going to come back and fill in that custom code in a second, but as you see, Xcode is yelling at us. Required initializer, init coder must be provided by a subclass of UI button. Basically what this means, you can hit the fix to have it fill in for you. Basically what this means is we have two initializer methods, and this one gets called, the coder one, when you initialize this GF button via storyboard. Now, of course, we're not, using storyboards, so that's why we just put fatal error, this could not be implemented, because we're not using any storyboards. However, when you're subclassing things from UI kit, like UI button, UI label, you have to handle the storyboard case. Again, we're not going to write any code in there, but Xcode will yell at you if you don't have the initializer. But the key takeaway is this is what handles initialization via storyboard. Now we're going to start implementing our custom code here that I put up there, and we're going to do this in a private func called configure.
What do
Classing
you say?
things from UI kit, like UI button, UI label, you have to handle the storyboard case. Again, we're not going to write any code in there, but Xcode will yell at you if you don't have the initializer. But the key takeaway is this is what handles initialization via storyboard. Now we're going to start implementing our custom code here that I put up there, and we're going to do this in a private func called configure. And I do just the generic configure because this is going to be private. By private, it means it can only be called in this class. So basically, like I can't if I initialize a button outside, in a view controller or something like that, I can't call like my GF button dot configure. Like I can't call that because that's what this private does. Because I don't want people calling this configure method outside the initialization of this button. So
I
that's
do
what
know
we're gonna
that.
do here. And we're gonna do this is we're gonna set up the look of the button. So layer dot corner radius equals 10. And then we're going to configure our title label now because we want all of our title labels to be like the same font and the same color. Because if you look at the design, like the background of the button can change, but the title.
So I have no idea what I kind of don't know what's happening right now because of I don't know this language that well.
White.
I don't know UI
So
kit that much.
title label dot text color equals dot white. So there's that. Now let's set the font. Title label dot font equals UI font, and here's where we're going to get into some dynamic type stuff. And we're not going to do a whole dedicated video on dynamic type, but we're going to kind of weave it in as we implement it. So if you do UI font dot preferred, can't type dot preferred font for text style, that's what we want here. So let's go to some documentation real quick. The human interface guidelines. This is the typography section. This will tell you
Jesus
all about
Christ,
some
look how
typography.
long this is compared to Swift. Holy shit, man. Oh my god, it's so much longer to write this in Swift.
Piece of information
Jesus.
right here. Choosing fonts to
I almost don't want to learn it to mess up my learning from freaking Swift.
enhance your app. Use built-in text styles whenever possible. The built-in text style lets you express content in ways that are visually distinct while retaining optimal legibility. These styles include headline, body, callout, several sizes of title. Anyway, but basically this is how you get dynamic type. And what is dynamic type? Pull up the phone here. You see in the settings, if you go to like display and brightness, scroll to the bottom, you'll see this text size, and you can see you can make your text size smaller or larger. And if your app is not adapting to dynamic type, then your app won't respond. Your fonts will always be the same size, which the user has, clearly stated like, hey, I want my font to be bigger, I want my font to be smaller. Now, sometimes you'll see in this project, we don't use dynamic type for everywhere we have words, because sometimes it doesn't make sense, but sometimes it does. And we'll talk about the nuance of that decision. Here in our button titles, we do want that to conform to dynamic type. And in order to do that, you do preferred font size for text style, and these are all the text styles here. If you type the dot, you can see body, callout, caption, footnote. These are all the different styles. Now, you may be wondering, like, well, we're going to use headline real quick. I just don't want Xcode to yell at me. So if you're wondering how do I know what all these look like, there's an amazing repo, and I use this for the colors we're going to talk about. So I'd recommend downloading this and putting this on your phone. It's called Semantic UI. And if you look here, basically all these semantic colors, right? We talked about the system pink, system blue. It'll just list all the colors in a table view, and you can switch your phone back and forth from dark mode to light mode. Pro tip, you can add that into Control Center, so you can just swipe down from the upper right, or however you get to Control Center, flip to dark mode like super fast.
Oh, that's interesting.
So in this app, you can switch back and forth between light mode and dark mode, see how all these colors change. And there's a ton of colors. I'm probably scrolling through here on an app. But this also has fonts. If you look here, you can see large title, headline. You can see what the fonts are. You can even see what the SF symbols look like. So I highly, highly recommend
Oh.
going to this repo. Link will be in the course information. And downloading this app and putting it on your phone. While I was building this project, I was
That's pretty cool.
constantly opening this up, flipping back and forth between light and dark mode, because you'll see there's like all different shades of gray. There's like primary gray, secondary gray,
Shades of
tertiary
gray,
gray,
LOL.
and seeing what those look like on light and dark mode super fast. This is an insanely valuable app. Go download this right now. I promise you, you will use it a ton. So back to our button, we have our text style, which is headline. Essentially, headline is like bold, and we want our button titles to be bold. And for auto layout purposes, we want to translate our auto resizing mask into constraints equals false. Basically what this says is to use auto layout. And when you're doing your UI programmatically, which we haven't got into yet, we will get into that in the next video where we start building that screen. One of the things you need to do is always set those into false so you actually use auto layout. It's actually kind of annoying. Like every time you create, like if you were to create a UI button or a GF button in your view controller, you would have to make sure you had this line of code. So by putting it here in the actual GF button class, anytime we initialize a GF button, because we know we're going to use auto layout and do our constraints programmatically, so I don't have to type this out every single time. Every GF button that I make is going to have their auto resizing mask into constraints is going to be false. So that's why I do that. And by the way, you don't have to do this. I'm going to start doing this, is lining up my equal signs. I like the way it looks. I think it looks nice and clean. Some people disagree with it. You don't have to do it. I'm going to do it. So now that we have our basic configuration, again, what we're doing is we're setting our corner
I
radius
actually
to 10.
don't like that because what about this? What about the false section here?
And as you see in the button
I don't like it.
here, our title label is going to be white, and our preferred font size is going to be headline, and we translate our auto resizing mask into false. So let's make sure we call configure up in the initial initializer. So the basics of this is done. However, as you saw in the design, we have different colors. I don't want to have to do GF button dot background color equals this every single time. So we're going to create a custom initializer. So in our view controllers, when I initialize a GF button, I can pass in a color and a title, right? Because the background color and what the button says is going to be different every time. So by creating that custom initializer, I can just do that all in one line. And again, you'll see how this comes into play when we build the search screen in the next video. So to do that, let's go ahead and type out, we're typing out another init method. So init, and then we're just creating our own one. So we're going to do background color. So we want to pass in, that's going to be a UI color. And we're also going to pass in a title, which is a string. So, and just like we did up here, where we had to call the super init, super.init, and this time we don't have a frame to pass through. Like up here on line 13, we got a frame, so we just kind of passed through that same frame down to here. But this time we're just going to do .0. So cgrec.0, normally when you initialize the button, you have to give it a height, width, x and y coordinates. Well, we know we're going to do all that with auto layout constraints, so we can initialize this with a frame of 0. So now we need to set our background color and title. So we do self.background color equals background color. And what's going on here is we're setting the background color of the button equal to whatever we passed in right here, this background color. I know they're the same name, but that's why. This one being in blue and having the self before it. So self means this button, this GF button. So this GF button's background color, and that's blue. Blue lets you know it's like a default thing, is going to be equal to the background color that we pass in. So that's how that goes down. So same thing with title. Self dot set title, and then we need to pass in a string. We're going to pass in the title that we pass in here, and then for control state is dot normal. So there's different states of buttons like press and all that stuff. Normal is what you have to use most of the time. So
Set
yeah, we're setting our
title.
title to whatever we pass in and background color. So what this is going to allow us to do, and again you'll see this in the next video, is when we initialize the GF button, we can use this initializer and right away just pass in whatever background color we want and then whatever title we want it to be, and our GF button is set all in one line. We don't have to do all this configuration in the view controllers. Again, you're going to see this come into play in the next video. So the last thing we need to do to make this complete is call configure that we wrote down here. So what happens here is, again, we pass in the background color and the title, it sets that right here, and then it also calls configure as well, so it sets up all the corner radius, the font color, and the constraint stuff. So this is the GF button, and again, we're going to use this a lot, so you're going to see how much time this saves when we just initialize that real quick. And then one quick note I forgot to mention about the dynamic type is this is for like the default SF font, the system font in Apple. That's the font we're using. Because what we're actually going for this to feel like an Apple app. That's why we're using a lot of the default stuff. However, I know you out there, may be dealing with a lot of custom stuff, custom fonts, all that stuff. I'm not discouraging custom fonts. That's perfectly fine. Just know that there's extra work that you have to do, and there is a way to have your custom font conform or make it available for dynamic type. But again, there's extra steps there. I'm not going to get into that. I just wanted to let you know it is possible. So now we're going to do something very similar for that custom text field that you see on screen. You see it's got some rounded corners. We have some font sizing. We have the placeholder value. So let's go ahead and do that as well. So back to our GitHub followers folder here on the left. Again, Command N for a new file. Cocoa Touch class. Hit Next. Make it a subclass of a UI text field. And we're going to call this, again, GF text field.
Oh shit.
Now, because we don't have a lot of text fields in this app, we're just going to call it the generic one. In projects, I've done something like AL authentication text field, AL onboarding text field. Like, you might want to get more specific because a lot of apps have more text fields. But for us, we're just going to name it that. And then same thing. We're going to have the required init. A lot of this will be very similar, but that's fine. It's good. Repetition is the key to learning. So super.init, and then again, pass in the frame. We're not going to have a custom initializer on this one, so this will be a little simpler. And again, we're going to get the required initializer. Remember, this is kind of like to really put it simply, this is the storyboard initializer. And now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to call create our configure function. And it'll be private because I don't want people to configure this or call configure outside of this file. So private configure. And now we're going to start, let's make sure we call it. I always kind of forget to do that. Now we're going to start writing all the stylization code. And especially with text labels, because you got like keyboard stuff, return types, all that.
So this like sets up, this is the setup for your text and your views and stuff. Okay. Interesting. Because this is so different from Swift. You don't need any of this, I think.
There's a lot of stylization code. So this is why these are great to just make a custom text field and yank all that out of your view controller. Oh, I forgot to put...
I don't want any of this learning to override my Swift learning.
Do that. All right, so let's start writing this custom code. So the first thing I want to write so I don't forget is the auto resizing constraints equals false. And then we're going to do... so I like to space out my code. You'll see how this works. I'll come back and explain this. But we're going to do layer.corner radius. Same thing, equals 10. Let's be consistent. And I like to logically group these. So corner radius is around the edge of the text field. So now I'm also going to talk about the border. As you can see here in the design, it does have a little border, a color to it as well. So layer.border width equals 2. Layer.border color equals .system. Actually, I forgot. When dealing with layer.border color, you have to use .cg colors. So in order to do that, you have to do the full UI color .system. We're gonna do system gray 4. And again, how I came up with this shade was using that semantic colors app. Scrolling through there, looking for the kind of gray I wanted, and then use that. Because this gray in light mode is different than it'll be in dark mode. So, and again, you can flip back and forth between dark mode and light mode on that app to see the difference. And then, like I said, when dealing with the layers, you have to do .cg color for core graphics. And then continuing with the logical groupings, now we're starting to deal with like the text. So we're going to do text color of this label equal, and then back to the colors things. There's a color called .label. I know that doesn't sound like a color, but it is. So what .label is, this will be basically black on light mode and white on dark mode. It's kind of like the standard UI label color. So that's what we're going to use for, the color of the text in there. And then now we're going to use tint color. So what tint color does is tint color is the blinking cursor. So we want that to be the same color as that. Again, black in light mode, white in dark mode. Text alignment. We're going to make this center where they enter the username. I don't want it like a line left. It looks weird. So just .center for the text alignment. And again, we're going to use dynamic type for this. So the font is going to equal UI font.preferred font for text style. And we're going to use title 2, again, because I want this to be larger and bigger. And then now we do want to adjust the font size to fit width. And that's going to be to true. So basically what this means, if somebody has a really long username, the font will kind of shrink to make sure it fits in the text field. And we do want to have the minimum font size equal to 12. So I want it to shrink, but I don't want it to go down to like 4-point font. Like the minimum is 12. So just to keep it looking good. Next, we want to set the background.
Bro, I haven't seen any of this before.
Tertiary. Tertiary system background. Again, you can look at the semantic color app to see how I got that. I wanted it to be like a very lighter color. I didn't want to blend in with the background, but not super bold. So that's how I came up with this.
Holy
now
shit.
We want to set up the auto correction type, right? Because we don't want equals dot. You can see the different types you can do. Default, no, yes. I don't want auto correcting, right? Because usernames, all kinds of weird stuff. I don't want the annoying auto correct. So we're gonna turn auto correct off for this text field. So you can see all the difference that we haven't even gotten into keyboard type stuff yet. We're gonna do that in a later video. But you can see how like a label, there's a lot to customize. So that's why, like I mentioned before, and I just want to reiterate, even though I'm not reusing this label, I still like putting all this code into a custom, GF text field label. Because if I didn't, I would have to have all this styling code in my view controller, and that's just clutter that's unnecessary. So the last thing we want to do is the placeholder text. So again, type placeholder equals, and then give it a string, say enter a user name for our placeholder text. And I know I kind of rattled through that pretty quickly. You may be wondering, like, oh, how I kind of came up with this. You got to remember, I've already coded this project before, so I know like what is going to be there. How I figured it out, because I want to talk through my thought process, is again, I designed it, and then, as I'm building it, I'm like testing things.
My hat was making me so mad. It's like trying to lean back, and this part just hitting into the my chair every time, shoving my head out. All right, I'm just gonna grab a drink really quickly, so I'll be right back. Gonna turn off my video for a sec while I grab my drink. My audio's still on though. I can actually just walk around wirelessly. Oh my god! I've made some mugicha. They would know what mugicha is. If you don't know what it is, in English it's barley tea. But in Japanese it's mugicha. It's very popular over there, and it's usually an alternate for water. If any of you have been to Japan, you would know. It is absolutely delicious. Absolutely delicious. Okay, I'm pretty much back. Let me have a sip of this. Oh my god. I love mugicha. So good. So good.
right? Like I didn't know exactly I wanted system gray. I tested a couple colors. Okay, cool. System gray is the one I wanted. Tested different border widths. Yeah, okay, two feels the best. Same thing with quarter radius. Same thing with all this stuff, right? There was testing and tweaking that went into this. I guess I don't want to
Why is there
portray
so much dust in my
that you
place
have to
here?
have all this figured out before you start typing. There's a lot of trial and error that goes into building and tweaking this. That's typically how it goes. Again, of course, when I'm teaching the video, I don't want to go through all that trial and error on the video, right? I have all my values. And you're going to see that a lot, especially when it comes to laying out the UI with all the custom constraints and stuff. Like we're going to be doing a lot of like padding and all that stuff, and I'm going to have the numbers dialed in right away. That's because I went through a lot of trial and error tweaking. So that is normal. So the last little bit of cleanup I like to do here is line up my equal signs. Again, you don't have to do this. So this is going to be the longest one, so I always kind of try to line it up with that one. It's just the easiest way. Yes, this is tedious. This is why people don't like it. It's tedious. I get it. I am not going to act like it's not tedious. But I
Bro,
just
there's no
literally
point.
think it makes the code look a lot cleaner, a lot easier to read. And again, some people think it's harder to read because their eyes have to go back and forth to like make sure which lines up. But that's why I do like the logical spacing. Again, this is just my preference. You can choose how to do it how you like. But this is our GF text field. We can't really run it because we haven't built one yet. But in the next video, we're going to utilize the GF button and the GF text field to quickly build our search screen. Because right, we've done a lot of the styling right here because it's
Oh, we
basically
already
just a
finished this
text field
video. Holy
with a
shit.
button.
Oh, holy
So
shit.
it's going to
My
go real
voice.
quick in the next video because we've done this work up front. So let's get to it. We left off in the last video, we had just completed our custom button and custom text field. So in this video, we're going to get to see the fruits of our labor, right? We're going to get to utilize those objects that we built. So you can see once you have all that stuff, kind of pre-built, you'll see how quickly building screens, those objects that we built. So you can see once you have all that stuff, kind of pre-built, you'll see how quickly building screens is and how clean it can be. This is also going to be the first video where we get into programmatic UI and programmatic constraints and how to lay all that out. So we're going to dive into that as well.
Well, I'm
At
at
the end of the
least
video,
excited
we're
for
just
this
going to
part.
have our search screen looking exactly like you see on the design. So let's go to our search VC. All this in here is that system pink background. We're going to get rid of that. We don't need that anymore. As you can see up here in the design, we basically want to lay out three elements, right? We have our logo at the top, we have our text field, and we have our get followers button. So the first thing we want to do is initialize those three objects. And I like to do, when I'm creating my objects, this is just logo at the top. All this in here is that system pink background. We're going to get rid of that. We don't need that anymore. As you can see up here in the design, we basically want to lay out three elements, right? We have our logo at the top, we have our text field, and we have our get followers button. So the first thing we want to do is initialize those three objects. And I like to do,
yeah.
when I'm creating my objects, this is just a personal preference and a style thing. I like to do them in order of like appearance from top to bottom. And I try to do that with my functions too. Sometimes it doesn't always work out, but I try to keep my functions in like the order that they're going to kind of be called in. But anyway, so we're going to say let's logo image view equal, and this is going to be a UI image view. Just a plain old UI image view because there's nothing custom about it. We're going to make some custom image views later in the course, but right now that's just a regular UI image view. And now here's kind of where you're going to see the magic of our custom objects here. So
Right.
Username text field equal GF text field. So there you go. So just by doing that, we get all that customization because when we call this initializer, if we go back to the text field, GF text field, this is what gets called when we just do that initializer. And if you notice in our initializer, we're calling configure. So configure gets called on our GF button, and then all this styling happens. So that's what's going on with our custom objects here. And you're going to see that even more in play here with the let's.
Fascinating. This is
I like to
fascinating.
call these generic names if I can. So call to action button. You could say get followers button, something like that, but what if the title changes to something different? Now your get followers button doesn't really line up with the new title of the button. That's happened to me many, many times. So that's why I try to get these generic. So call to action button is going to be our GF button. Now you can see when we do our initializer, we get the autocomplete. And since we have our
Oh,
custom initializer
yeah,
here
okay.
with background color and title, that now shows up in the autocomplete, right? If we didn't write that, we would just be able to initialize it with a frame. But we're going to initialize it with the background color. That is going
System
to be
green, is that right?
green, like you see in the design. And then the title we're going to pass in is get followers, just like that. So you can see, like, I don't have to, with this custom initializer, just pass in a color, pass in a title, we're good. I don't have to configure all that in my view controller. And then just like in the text field, this is what gets called. I'm setting the background color for what I passed in, setting the title for what I passed in, and then we also call configure, and it configures all this other stuff that we set up as well. So again, just in that line of code, our GF buttons are completely stylized. We just have to lay it out. And I know I like to do, again, the two vertical spaces. I just deleted the background color, but we have to do that actually. So view.background color equals .system system background. What this is going to be for light mode, this is going to be white. For dark mode, it's going to be black. Again, we're implementing the dark mode as we go. So if you did background color .white, it would always be white. But now with system background, it's going to adapt. And the other thing, if you look at this design, you notice this initial page doesn't have the nav bar at the top, right? We wanted it clean. We didn't want the nav bar. That was just a design choice. You could have the nav bar if you like, but you'll see if you put it in, it kind of looks weird. So we want to hide the nav bar on just this screen. So if we did that in view did load, that would work. But we're going to do it in view will appear, and I'll tell you why here in a second. So let's write our other lifecycle method, view will appear, and make sure you call the super. Anytime you're overriding something, most of the time you're going to want to call the super, right? The only time you wouldn't want to call the super is, again, if you didn't want the parent function to be called where you get all the functionality for free. So super.view will appear, and then we're going to pass in animated that you see up here. And we're going to do navigation controller dot is navigation bar hidden, that's what I thought it was, equals true. Now, the reason we're doing that in view will appear is because, as the name of the function says, like, this is what happens every time the view will appear. View did load only gets called the first time the view loads. So what happens is, if we did it in view did load, it would look fine. And then we would hit get followers, it would pull up our collection view of follower list, and then when we hit back...
Oh my god, this is so different, bro. So different from Swift. Holy moly. So different. What the hell?
the navigation bar would be there, because the navigation bar is there on the next screen. We're gonna code it so it is. Because view to load doesn't get called when you go back, because the view has already been loaded. However, in view will appear, this gets called every time the view appears. So if I go back, back to the search screen from the follower list, this
Oh my god.
called. So I want to make
this
sure
is just a dot
I hide
on
the
appear
navigation
now.
bar every time this pops up. And once I test this out later in the course, I'll be sure to point that out as well. Because basically, when we go to the follower screen, we're going to have to set navigation controller.isNavBar hidden to false. Like, we're going to want to show that, and you'll see that later. So to lay out this screen, I'm going to break each item down individually. You can kind of refactor this how you like. There's many different ways to do it. For educational purposes, I'm going to break each one down individually in its own function, like you'll see here. So the first thing we want to lay out, again, I like to do top to bottom. And first of all, you know what we got to do before we forget? Line them up.
Oh my god.
So let's call this func configure logo image view, right? So when you're building your UI programmatically, this is going to, I guarantee you're going to forget to do this all the time. I still do. You'll configure everything. Nothing happens until you add that view to the sub view. So view.add subview. We want to add logo image view, right? This is the equivalent of, if you're used to storyboard, that line of code is the equivalent of grabbing a UI image view out of the library, dragging it onto your view controller, and dropping it. That's adding the sub view. So imagine you write all this configuration code and you forget this line. That's like...
Okay, this confuses me. I want to see, what does view.add subview equate to in Swift UI or Swift? What's the crossover? Yeah. Right. It's just so much more straightforward. Holy. So much more straightforward. Unbelievable.
configuring it, but forgetting to add it to your view controller in storyboard. So I do this all the time. I'll forget to add it to the sub view.
It's
It
almost like
happens,
absolutely
but you got to
pointless
do that for everyone, and you'll see that.
now.
And like I mentioned before, when you're dealing with programmatic UI and auto layout, you have to do the logo image view dot translates auto resize.
Oh, it looks like most people have some other language that they are learning or use, and JavaScript. I mean, there's so many. You know what? I should have put Python in there, but I wish there was more. I can't. There's only a certain amount of poll options I could put in there, so I just put the one I'm learning, Swift, and then JavaScript, which is pretty common, React Native, which is like I think generalized for the most part, right? And then other, which I guess basically will encompass everything else. Everything else.
Mask into constraints equals false.
Did I?
Configuring it, but forgetting to add it to your view controller in storyboard. So
All right, let's.
I do this all the time. I'll forget to add it to the sub view. It happens, but you got to do that for everyone, and you'll see that. And like I mentioned before, when you're dealing with programmatic UI and auto layout, you have to do the logo image view dot translates auto resizing mask into constraints equals false. Now you're going to notice I'm not going to have to do this line of code for my GF text field and GF button, because remember, we put that line of code in the custom object. But this is just a regular UI image view. This isn't a custom one, so that's why I have to write that line of code. And then the last thing I want to do is logo, not the last thing, but the next thing, logo image view dot image equals, and we're going to initialize the UI image named. Scroll down here to the autocomplete, pass in the string, and this is gh-logo.
Named.
Logo. Actually,
named.
great segue. I did that by accident.
We're not gonna
do this right now because these aren't being reused, but this is what's called stringly typed, and this is a little dangerous because stringly typed, that's not like an official term. It's kind of like a nickname that the community has given it. But like I just did, right? I had loho.
Stringly
right
typed.
That typo will crash my app. This is why the strings are kind of dangerous. So oftentimes you'll see anytime with stringly type with maybe like segues. Well, we're not using storyboard. You'll see with later we're going to kind of refactor these into constants. That way I don't have to type it out every time. I'm not going to do this right now because we're not like reusing this this name. You'll see us do more with this later. But that's anytime you see something stringly typed, you should automatically kind of think to put it into a constant. So if you have to type it again, like for example, if we had to initialize 5 images of GH logo, I would have to type it out every time. But if I put it into a constant, into a variable, now I would do something like images.logo, and it would autocomplete. I don't have to retype it. The string is only typed once where I define the constant. Again, that was a little impromptu side note because I did make a typo there. But that is setting the image to the logo that we see. So now comes the fun part. Now is where we get to lay out all the constraints programmatically. So to do that, you want to do nslayout constraint.activate. You may have seen, and I've done this in previous videos, I'm constantly learning myself and improving, where I did them all individually, and then you would see like .isActive equals true. You would see that at the end of it, and like it's very repetitive. Well, the more efficient way is to do ns constraint.activate and then put an array of constraints in there, and this all activates it. This is the more efficient, better way. A rule of thumb when laying out your constraints is, again, rule of thumb doesn't mean it's 100% accurate, but almost all the time this is going to be true, is you want to have 4 constraints per object. Usually it's a height, width, and x coordinate, y coordinate. Like those are the 4 things auto layout needs to know to where to put something. So you're going to see 4 constraints on everything. If you find yourself having 7 constraints on an object, you're probably messing up. Or if you find yourself having 2, like something's missing. Sometimes on labels you only need 3. Again, there's edge cases where you can get away with only having 3, but for the most part you're going to need 4. So
okay,
let's do. So for this image, I know it's going to be a square, as you see up here in the design. It's going to be at the top. So let's do logo image view dot top anchor, because this is what we're pinning to the top. Dot constraint. So this is where we're setting the actual constraint value. And there's a whole bunch of these. These are kind of confusing. I get it. I always do, or not always, for the most part, equal to another anchor. So anchors were introduced in iOS 9 It's a much easier way to write constraints. So basically, this is what I'm pinning it to if you're familiar with doing constraints via storyboard. And then I got to give it a constant. So what I want to make this, what I want to pin it to or equal to is the view.top, I'm sorry, view.safe area layout guide, because at the top right, you got the notch to deal with. So we want to make sure we're doing the safe area layout guide on the top. We don't necessarily have to worry about that on the sides because remember, we're not doing landscape. You have to worry about safe area on the side and landscape because when you rotate the phone, you know, the notch is on the left. View.safearealayoutguide.top anchor. This is super long here. And the constant we want is 80. Again, remember what I said is that like I have all these numbers dialed in. This took trial and error to try to figure it out. And then logo, image view, dot center x. So we're centering it in the x here, right? Dot constraint. And then now I don't need a constant, right? I just need equal to another anchor, as you see there. And then I want this to be equal to view.center x anchor. So basically
Okay, I
what I'm
already
saying
knew.
is center this in the view. And if this is a little bit confusing, you're not quite following along, trust me, we're going to be doing constraints like this like 100 more times. So through repetition,
Oh
I
my
believe that you'll
god.
start to get it. Even if it is a
What?
little fuzzy right now, we're going to get
Dude.
a lot of practice at this throughout the course. Oh, by the way, we need comma since we're passing in an array. I kind of forget that sometimes. So comma, comma. So basically, this is an array of constraints that we're activating here. So again, we have our top anchor, which is where it is on the y coordinate, up and down. We know where
Yeah.
it's at on the x coordinate, side to
Oh,
side,
what?
center of the view. So we're missing height and width.
All right.
So logo, image view, dot height, anchor, dot constraint. And now we can just pass in a constant, right, equal to constant, because we're just passing in a number. And it's going to be 200.
Oops.
And same thing for the width, because this is a square image. And I actually recommend, if you're creating your own assets, like do your best to make them square images. Those are just so much more easier to lay out and deal with,
I bet
like
that's what that
aspect
is, yeah.
ratios and all that
There.
stuff. So logo dot image view dot width anchor, same thing, dot constraint equal to constant 200. So we're done configuring our image view. Again, we've added the sub view to the view, and the view is like the view that comes with the view controller. Every view controller has like the view, the main view.
This is
And then we're
unbelievably
setting the
way
we're already
longer
setting the
than
masking constraints
just
to false.
normal
That means we're
Swift.
going to use
Oh my
auto
god.
layout. And then we set the image to the GH logo. And again, this is going to flip back and forth between dark mode and light mode because we did that earlier with our assets. And we set all our constraints. Again, X, Y, height, width. So let's run this and see what we got on our search screen. Oh, I almost forgot. I do this all the time. We did not call the function. Configure logo image view. So now when we run it, we should see our logo placed nicely. And yep, there we are. Looks great, right? You see it's dead center.
Wait, how did he just run it and then it's there? Is this the view that comes up straight away? Oh yeah, it's a search view, that's right. Go on. Ooh, hoo, hoo, hoo. It's working, boys. It's working. Looks really good. It's fun to do a bunch of code and then see it just appear awesomely. I realize this is dark mode. How do I get to light mode? Light. Oh no. Do I need to go into... How come I can't control this? Do I have to... You can't anymore? Settings. Oh wait, no, just go into here and just... Oh no, because I don't use... There's no... Wait, will preview work here? No, because there's no preview. I just realized. Whoops. Let me go into settings then. Wait, how do we... Why is it automatically dark mode then? Can you not change... Can you not change it in here? Uh-oh. Wait, what? Why is it running on... Oh. Is there a way to set up this... Is there a way to set it up? Wait, what? Because I know my apps are usually in dark. So maybe that's why. I'm thinking, but... I know that's running in dark. I know it's running in dark. Um, Toggle appearance. Oh yeah, there we go. Cool. There we go. Ho ho.
It's 80 points from the safe area, so the bottom of the notch, and it's 200 by 200. That looks good. How I came up with the 200 by 200 is the smallest width of the phone, the iPhone SE, the old iPhone 5 model, is 320 points. This is where it helps to know like how many points. 14, they get a little bigger. You conditionally super fine detail, but you could go above and beyond if you choose to. So that was our logo image view. Now we just have two more items to lay out, right? We have our text field and our button. Remember I said we're going to get a lot of practice at constraints? Well, here we go. So next up, two spaces here. Func configure text field. And same thing. First thing we have to do, I want to drill this into your head. View.add subview username text field, right? That's the first thing you need to do. And then because we've done all our styling in the custom field, now we're just right on to constraints. We don't have to mess with anything. So ns layout constraint.activate. And again, if you've done this before and you've kind of like done this differently, like I said, I'm breaking this down into each item, the image view, the text field, the button for, educational purposes. There's other ways to refactor and organize this, of course. So again, we need X, Y coordinate, height, and width. So I always like to start with the top. So username text field dot top anchor dot constraint is going to equal. Now we're pinning it to the bottom of the logo image view. So there's going to be logo image view dot bottom anchor, and the constant is going to be 48. We want a space of 48. Again, I've tweaked that and dialed it in. So that's where it's going to be in the Y coordinate, right? It's pinned to the bottom of the logo image view.
I want to
Now we want
make
to
this color similar to his color. I like his,
handle kind of the width and the X
but
coordinate
not
where
the
it's going to
blue.
be.
I
We
don't
can
like
do
how
this
he
by pinning it to
combines
the
that.
edges. So we're going to pin it to the leading edge and the trailing edge with a space of 50 here. So you'll see username text field dot leading anchor. Again, this is like pinning it to the left and pinning it to the right in storyboard. Leading anchor dot constraint is equal to view dot leading anchor, and the constant is going to be 50. We're gonna
50, huh?
because we want it to be spaced in, so we want a lot of space on the edge. And then you'll see what this looks like. I'll explain it
See if
here
I
on the
run it,
design.
what happens?
Username text field dot trailing anchor dot constraint.
Does
Again,
it
the
auto
constant.
set that
So
up for me?
when you do the trailing anchors, and sometimes on the bottom, like you have to do the negative constant. That kind of catches me off guard sometimes. Sometimes I'll
Holy,
forget to do the negative sign, and it'll be all messed up.
holy
And I was like,
shit.
oh, it's got to be a negative number. So, and then now username text field. Now we need the height. Because we have the width, we have where it's at on the X coordinate, we have where it's at on the Y coordinate. Now we just need the height, and we're just going to hard code that at 50. I like my text fields to be pretty tall, nice and fatty, meaty, if you will, for the tap. Same thing with my buttons for the most part. So dot height anchor dot constraint equals 50. So if you look at the user interface guidelines, they'll recommend any button, any touch target should be at least 44 points high. So at least 44 points high. So 50 makes it a nice fat target. That's what I like. That's just personal preference. So now let's call configure text field in the view to load. Let's run it and see what we got. And there you are. See, there's the 48 points from the logo.
Oh wait, we don't need another one. I realize. Will that run? Yeah. Noise. What do we got going on? Looks good. Pretty good.
Top, you can see the 50 padding on each side. It's pinned to the edges, and then it's a height of 50. So now the layout is starting to come together. And like I said, if you feel like I think I'm not going fast, but if it feels like I'm going fast, we're going to do these constraints so much, you're going to get it by the end. The last remaining piece is the button. So again, same thing. A lot of repetition here when doing constraints via programmatically. So func configure button. I should be more specific in case there's ever another button on here. Call to action button. A good thing about programming is always trying to like future-proof your screens. Of course they may not always all change, but the longer you've been doing this, you realize that like things always change, right? Oh, can you add a button to this screen? Can you add something to this screen? Like as you're building the product, things always change. So like we did before, what's the very first thing you do? The equivalent of storyboard, you got to drag the button onto the storyboard. That's what's going on here. View.add subview call to action button. And again, remember, call to action button is what we defined up here. And look, we already know the background color is going to be green. We already know the titles get followers, so I don't have to like
Oh
configure
shit.
this at all. So we're right onto constraints. So again, repetition, ns layout constraint dot activate, and we're going to pass in this array of constraints here. So
How do we do
normally I've
this?
been pinning the stuff to the top, right? I pinned the logo to the top of the view. I pinned the text field to the bottom. In this case, I want the button to be pinned to the bottom. So we're not going to actually pin the top to anything. So we're going to do
Bottom?
call to action button dot bottom anchor dot constraint equal to view dot,
Interesting.
again, safe area layout guide, because again we have the home button indicator. Top and
Right.
bottom, you got to deal with safe
Dot
areas in our
bottom
specific
anchor?
app because we're not messing with landscape.
Wait, what is center anchor?
The left and right, you can get away with not using the safe area layout guide.
Oh yeah.
Dot
Bottom
yeah,
anchor?
the bottom, and the constant is -50. So like I said, on the trailing in the bottom, you got to use negative numbers. So now that's where it's going to be on the y coordinate, right? We're pinning it to the bottom of the screen with a padding of 50. And so let's do similar to what we did with the text field. We're going to pin it to the edges, except we're going to have a number there. Call to action button dot leading anchor dot constraint, not a multiplier. I mean, you could use multipliers. I just
there it
prefer
is.
constants. I mean, either one's going to be fine. View dot leading anchor, and the constant there is 50. Again, very basically, we want it to be very similar to the text.
Oh, I'm getting hungry.
All
I
lined
need to
up
get
nice
food
and
in a
neat.
sec.
Okay, call to action button dot trailing, again repetitive, dot constraint, and make sure. So I wish that autocomplete would always be the top one because it's the one I use the most. But hey, can't complain too much. Trailing anchor, and again the constant because it's trailing -50, and then again we have our y coordinate. It's pinned to the bottom. We have our width and x coordinate because we're pinning it to the left and right. We just need our height now. Call to action button dot height anchor, and again it is
50?
constant equal to constant 50. So we're going to give it a height of 50.
All right, let's
And
do
then the
this.
last thing we need to do is configure call to action button. And if we
There it
run again,
is.
our layout should be complete. And there you go. As you can
But
see, I'll
that's
put the design right up next to it. Very similar to the design. We have our logo at the
like
top,
clicking the button doesn't
username text field,
like
and get followers. And like
it's
I
not a
said,
typical
because
button.
we
You
did
know,
all
like you
the
try and
styling
click
in
it
our
and it doesn't
custom
like
GF button and our
depress.
custom GF text field.
You know what I
Our
mean?
view controller
So weird.
relatively small, right? There's not a lot of, we're at 68 lines of code right now, but really we're just adding the subview and laying it out. We're going to do some other stuff on this screen in the future, but hopefully you can
Just
see the
gonna
power of
pause
creating
this
those
music
custom objects, the custom button, the
situation.
custom text field. And if this was your first time doing constraints via programmatically, again, if it's a little fuzzy, we're going to be doing this a lot, so you're going to get plenty of practice. But yeah, we now have our nice layout here. The next thing we're going to do is start configuring the keyboard a little bit for when they enter a username, and then also pass data to the next screen so we can start building that beautiful collection view that I showed with all the followers. So, onward.
All right, I really should get some food, so
We finished up
I'm just gonna get food and I'll be back. How do I need to do this? Just gonna pin that. Place pin message. Yeah. Okay. I'm just gonna mute myself while I sort out my food, and yeah, I'll be back in just I don't know, like depends how long it takes. I need to heat something up. Probably like I don't know, 15 minutes or less, to be honest. Probably 10 minutes. All right. BRB. Just gonna mute and Alright, I'm back. Got some Peruvian food here. My girlfriend, she made that. I was just gonna take a mini break and quickly watch this video. Pause this music real quick and pull up X. Here's my bookmarks here. Let's check this video out real
Yeah.
quick.
Well, there's
Oh shit, is that too loud?
always the question of like
No.
what's going on.
So apparently there's about this underwater structure that was in Google Earth. They deleted it. Oh, what does that mean? Let's hear what he says.
Yeah. Well, there's always the question of like what's going on off the coast. And I'm sure you're aware of this one. That we actually talked about it the other day, but we never found it. There's a structure that's off of Malibu in the deep water that was available on Google Maps.
Was a structure.
And now it's blurred out.
Yep.
But it looked like there's openings in it. There's a top that's flat. It looks like
a base.
Looks like a base.
Looks like a base.
Yeah.
You know, if
now it doesn't.
Now it just looks like blurry water.
Yeah, like why does it look different now? Like what's going on?
With a gun to my head, all the weird stuff is in the ocean. It's not from another planet.
Really?
Nah, I don't know. Who knows? But it makes a lot more sense that the stuff we're seeing, it's the best place to hide is just deep water.
So not from another planet originally? Like maybe originally and that's where they
No, I think it is from another planet. I think it is. The underwater part specifically.
make their base.
I feel like if it's a underground base rather than an underwater base, I think it's gonna be more likely us. But if it's underwater, I think it's more likely them.
It's hard for me to square how to travel great distances. It's hard for me to square that. You know, I know that we've got the Albuquerque drive and warp drive and all these theoretical things about compressing space-time and all of that. I get it. But it's hard for me to think that that's solvable. But what is interesting is maybe another species evolved alongside of us a long time ago and has been here a long time and said, you know what, let's go. This is where we go to avoid cataclysms and geological instability. Let's go underwater.
That's a weird one though, because like what kind of technology are you utilizing? How did you achieve that level of technological superiority and not completely control man? Because if I was an intelligent species that was capable of developing bases under the water, I'd be super concerned at all the different things that human beings are doing to ruin things. Like if we had chimps that all of a sudden had flamethrowers and they were lighting the jungle on fire.
I feel like Joe Rogan always finds a way to incorporate chimps or apes or something into his statements. His hot takes. All right, let's continue this.
Last video by just creating our UI on our search view controller. The point of this video is going to be to pass the username we enter in the text field to the next screen, the follower list VC, so that eventually we can take that username and query to get all the follow.
Sometimes this guy talks too fast.
Last video by just creating our UI on our search view controller. The point of this video is going to be to pass the username we enter in the text field to the next screen, the follower list VC, so that eventually we can take that username and query to get all the followers for that username. So the whole point of this video is passing data. However, there's a few steps along the way that we got to do to get there, right? It's not just a clean path. For example, when you click into your username here, the keyboard slides up, great. So you type in whatever username you want. Oh crap, there's no way to get rid of the keyboard. When I hit return, like nothing happens. I can't hit the button. Even if I did hit the button, there's no button action to like do anything. So we got some work to do here. So the outline for the video is this. We're going to handle the keyboard stuff, dismiss the keyboard, hook up the return button. I don't know why, but that's kind of funny. We got to give the get followers button an action so it actually, does something. And then we have to pass the data, pass the username to the next screen. And we actually have to create the follower list screen as well. And we'll wrap up the video that way. So let's get started. First up, we're going to tap anywhere on that text field to dismiss, and we're going to use a tap gesture to do that. Actually, if I pull back up the UI, there's a couple different ways to do this. I've done it before where there's like an input accessory view above the keyboard that maybe has like a dismiss button on it, and I create an extension so like all my text fields have that. That's one way to do it. We're going to keep it simple here and just tap anywhere on the screen to dismiss the keyboard. So to do that,
how do you do that?
We're going to add a tap gesture recognizer. Again, so when you tap anywhere, we'll dismiss. So let's create that function here. Func create dismiss keyboard.
Wait, where should I do that? Maybe up here.
And so we're going to start off with let tap equals UI tap gesture. Now, there's a bunch of different gestures you could implement, right? Swipe gestures, pan gestures, etc. You see this one's going to be a tap gesture, but you can see UI swipe gesture recognizer. There's that. So you can look into gesture recognizers more if you like, but we're just going to use the basic tap gesture recognizer.
UI tap gesture recognizer.
You're taking a target, which is going to be the self.view, and the selector is going to be hashtag selector. So selector is like the action. You're going to see us use this again when we add the target to our button. The get
Wait, it's a little bit cold. Hold on. It's cold now. Turn down the air conditioner. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Button, which tells us to actually like do something. So you'll see that. And the Objective-C method we're going to use is UI view.end editing. And we're not passing in any parameters. That's what this like parentheses underscore colon is. You know, we're not passing in anything. So we can clean that up a little bit. And if you're wondering what end editing does, like where did I come up with that? Google. But anyway, open in developer documentation, and you can see. So it causes the view or one of its embedded text fields to resign the first responder status. So I don't want to go down the whole rabbit hole of the responder chain. At a high level, what that means is like what view is going to intercept the tap target on when the user actually touches the glass of the screen, what view is actually going to act on that action. And right now the text field is the first responder. So when you resign first responder status, the keyboard will dismiss and we're back to the normal view. So that's what that does. And after we create the gesture, we have to like put it onto a specific view. And the view we're going to put it on is just the overall view, right? We want them to tap anywhere. In theory,
UI view.end editing. Do you delete this? You delete that? Oh, okay.
We could add this tap gesture to the logo UI image view, and they would have to tap the logo. Just to let you know what you can do. That's bad UX. But anyway, so we're going to do view.add gesture recognizer. And the gesture recognizer we're going to add is the one we just created on line 34. So tap right up there. Now if we call this function here in view to load, create dismiss keyboard tap gesture. So now if we run it again, once we pull up the keyboard, we should be able to tap anywhere on the screen and the keyboard dismisses. So enter username.
Really?
SSSS. We're going to tap up here in the upper right somewhere. Keyboard dismisses. Pull up the keyboard, tap down here in the lower left, keyboard dismisses. So again, this is just one way to dismiss the keyboard. Like I said, I've used the input accessory view before. We're going to keep it simple here. So that is complete. However, now we just have this return key, and the return...
Wait, mine doesn't work? Whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. We got a problem here. Got a serious problem. Why is this not green?
Key doesn't create the
Did I self.view, right? .view. There we go. I let autocomplete do it for me, and that was a mistake. I think it should work now. Missing the view part. I'm surprised it ran before even. There you go. Cool.
Sure, we have to like put it onto a specific view logo. Create it, run it again. Pull up the key is to do something aware of and a phone number. You can go just have anywhere on the screen and the keyboard dismiss. One way to dismiss the keyboard. Like I said, I've used the input accessory view before. We're going to keep it simple here. So that is complete. However, now we just have this return key, and the return key doesn't do anything. If you didn't know, you can actually customize this return key to to say something, to do something, like a done button, a go button, send button, whatever is applicable to what you're doing with that button. We're going to
Did you see
turn
that?
on to a go button. So let's do that. So if you weren't aware, all this keyboard customization and stylizing is attached to the text field. So in theory, like if you had 3 text fields, each text field would have a
That
different
was
keyboard type, right?
weird.
You could, like if you were entering a name and a phone number, you can change the keyboard type for the phone number text field to just be a number pad. So we have to go back into our GF text field, our custom text field, and in all this customization, we need to add one more thing, and that would be, you can do keyboard type right here. And that is going to equal, I'll do dot, I'll show you all the options. I mean, ASCII, numpad, default, email address. This is a big one because a lot of apps require email, and the email address keyboard is just more convenient for entering an email. But you can see there's a bunch of different keyboard types. And I forgot, we're actually just changing the return type, not the keyboard type, but still, I'm going to leave this in here, even though this was a mistake, because it's good learning for you to see all the different keyboard types and a good practice
Just
to
default?
make sure you have the right keyboard type to what you're entering in the text field. Again, ours is still default,
return
so
key
we don't
type.
need this. And I did
Search.
type that. We're looking for return key
Dot.
type. That's
Continue.
what we're looking
Done.
for. And my spacing's all messed up. There.
Go.
Placeholder, get back down there.
Interesting.
So return
Go.
key type, not keyboard
Google?
type. But again, I left it in. Good learning. Is dot. Now you can see this is what the keyboard return key is going to say.
It's a Google one.
Continue. Done.
Yahoo.
Emergency call. Go.
What
Google.
the?
Join. Next. Right. There's a whole bunch of them.
What the heck?
We're going to go with go because that's what we want. We wanted to say go. So that is just customizing what the keyboard return key says. We haven't hooked it up yet.
It's what
That's
it
the next.
says.
Now, in order to take an action when the scroll button is pressed, the search VC will need to conform to the UI text field delegate. And we're going to talk more about delegates and protocols throughout this course. At a very, very high level, think about a delegate. Like a delegate just sits back and listens, basically. And it's basically, once it's listening to something, like this delegate is going to listen to this view controller, it's going to say like, when this action happens, I will act on this. And in our case, our action is going to be tapping the return key, and then it'll wait for that to happen, and then the view controller will take an action. That's super high level. We're going to get into it more throughout the course. But so this is also a personal preference here is when I conform to a delegate, whether it be the UI table view delegate or scroll view delegate, in this case the text field delegate, I like to put those in extensions. This is just to compartmentalize the code and organize it. Doesn't change the performance at all. It's a personal preference, a code organization thing. A lot of people love it. Some people are against it. Take it or leave it. So I do extension, and then this is going to be on the search.
I actually want to hear that part again.
And again, UI will take an action. That's super high level. We're going to get into it more. Just say go. So we'll need to conform to the UI text field delegate. And we're going to talk more about delegates and protocols throughout this course. At a very, very high level, think about a delegate. Like a delegate just sits back and listens, basically. And it's basically, once it's listening to something, like this delegate is going to listen to this view controller, it's going to say like, when this action happens, I will act on this. And in our case, our action is going to be tapping the return key, and then it'll wait for that to happen, and then the view controller will take an action. That's super high level. We're going to get into it more throughout the course. But so this is also a personal preference here is when I conform to a delegate, whether it be the UI table view delegate or scroll view delegate, in this case the text field delegate, I like to put those in extensions. This is just to compartmentalize the code and organize it. Doesn't change the performance at all. It's a personal preference, a code organization thing. A lot of people love it. Some people are against it. Take it or leave it. So I do extension, and then this is going to be on the search VC. And again, UI text field delegate. Text field delegate. There we go. And then once I conform to this, well, I should get an error here in a second. Maybe not. Oh, I haven't set the delegate yet. I thought I was going to get an error. So actually, let's do that since I mentioned it before we actually write in the function. Basically, remember I said this, when you conform to a delegate, you're sitting there listening. Well, you have to tell the view controller like what to listen to. So in our case, we want it to listen to the username text field, like right when the return key gets entered. So in our configure text field, we have to set the delegate. This is a very common mistake. A lot of times people try to conform to a delegate without like setting the delegate. And essentially setting the delegate is saying like, hey, listen to me. But if it doesn't know who to listen to, it doesn't act on it. So in order for us to actually act on this UI text field delegate, we have to do username text field dot delegate equals self. And again, self being the search VC. That's self. So now we're listening to this text field, if you will. So the text field delegate has a bunch of functions, but if you just start typing should, you're going to get a should, or I'm sorry, text field here's where you get all the delegates, like did end editing, did begin editing. So you can see like how you can take action when stuff is going on. Should clear, should end editing, did end editing. We're going to do should return. Text field should return. So basically this happens when you press the button. And we're just going to print something real quick. Print did tap return, just to make sure it's working. So let's run the program again. This is where we're going to.
Ooh.
Crap, I got to return true. Return true. Sorry. Now we're going to run it, and this is just to make sure our delegate is all hooked up and working. And then once we pass the data, we're going to call that pass data function right in here. So tapping on the username text field, you see our nice go button down here. Let's tap on go, and you see we printed did tap return. So our UI text field delegate is all hooked up, working. Again, we're going to replace this print statement with our function that says, basically pass the data to the next screen. We haven't written that yet. That's what we're going to start working on now. Before we can pass data, we have to have like a destination to pass that data to, right? And that is going to be our follower list VC, which as you see here on the screen, that is going to be the collection view of all the followers. In order to get those followers though, we need to know what username to make the network call on. So that's what we're doing here. So again, get up followers, Command N, and you may notice, we'll talk about this after we create this. So there's going to be UI view controller again, and this is going to be follower list VC. Next, yep, create it. So now you may notice this is getting a bit unruly here on the left. We're going to refactor that in a little bit and talk about architecture and all that stuff. Again, one thing at a time. So follower list VC is here. So when you're passing data, essentially you have to have a variable on this screen to set. This will make sense in a little bit if you've never passed data. So what we're doing on the follower list VC is we want to pass a username. So that means the follower list VC has to have a username variable. Var username, and it's going to be of type string. And there we go. So this username will be set when we pass the data to it. So now that we have that, let's go back and actually pass the data. So back in our search VC, you can see here, well, first of all, there's two ways to get there, right? They can hit the go button on the keyboard, which we just did, and they can also tap the get followers button. So we have the go path done on the keyboard. Let's actually add a target to the call to action button, which will pass the data. When you add a target, just like we talked up here about the gesture recognizer, where you have an action, a hashtag selector, we have to pass in a function. So our function is going to be the function that actually passes the data. So let's create that function first. So when we create our button target, we have a function to give it to, and you'll see how that all ties together. So let's create our function up here. And real quick, if you notice that I'm putting these functions up here, it's because I typically like to keep all my UI configuration stuff towards the bottom, only because most likely when you come back and you're adjusting a screen, most likely you're kind of messing with the logic. You may not be messing with the existing UI, so I like to kind of push that towards the bottom. Again, personal preference thing, just letting you into my mind. So the next thing is going to be function push, because remember we're talking about the navigation controller. We're pushing a new view controller onto the stack. Back to a couple videos ago with that stack of a deck of cards reference, we're pushing a new view controller onto the stack. So the terminology with navigation controllers is push and pop. So when you go back, you're popping that view controller off the stack to show the view controller underneath it. So push follower list VC. And we're going to fill in this function with code in a bit, but I wanted to get that there so when I create my button target, I can actually give it a function. And anytime you're using hashtag selector up here, the function you create is going to have to be an @objc function. And that's because when you use hashtag selector, this is still kind of remnant from Objective-C, so you have to expose this function to Objective-C there. So now we want to add our target to the button. So now in the configure call to action button, we're going to...
I'm 32. How old are you and us?
add the target. So call to action button dot add target, as you see. Again, target is going to be self. Action, like we said, hashtag selector. And then see how it says it takes in an @objc method. That's why we just did that. And it's going to take in push follower list VC, and it's going to be touch up. So it's kind of weird. Touch up inside is the normal button tap, but there's all kinds of different button taps you can do, drag enter, drag inside. To be honest with you, I've never used anything else besides TouchUp Inside, so it's kind of an edge case to use the other stuff, but at least you know they exist. The kind of
TouchUp Inside sounds really weird. Is it just me? Oh, got a weird headache. Why? Why?
taps you can do on a button. So we added basically what this line of code says, adding the target, is whenever we tap the get followers button, the call to action button, push follower list VC is what's going to be called. And right now there's no code in there, but that's what's going to be called when we tap the button. And then push followers VC, let's actually go ahead and do it now, is what we're going to call here.
Why do I have an error? Right. Now I know.
And text field should return. So this push followers VC function is going to be called when the user taps go on the keyboard or when they tap get followers button. So now let's pass some data in this function. So first of all, we need to create the follower list VC. Let follower list VC equal capital FOL follower list VC, right? The class type. We're creating a new one. And now we just need to, now that we have the object of the follower list VC, remember our follower list VC now has a username variable. So we can do follower list VC, the lowercase one, right, the local one, dot username, because it has that, equals username text field dot text. Now, if you're astute, you may be saying, oh, we're opened up to some errors. What if it's an empty text? What if it's all kind of crazy characters? We're going to get into that text validation in a little bit. For right now, we're just testing. They call it like the golden path or the happy path, right? The no edge cases, not accounting for weird things. Like we just want to make sure the happy path works, and then we go in and handle the edge cases. So we also want to set the title of this VC. So follower list VC dot title equals username text field dot text, and we got to line these up. And then now the navigation controller that we're already in, we want to push the follower list VC on top of the stack now that we've configured it. So push navigation, or I'm sorry, navigation controller dot push view controller, and is going to be the follower list VC that we just created, and animated is going to be true. We want to see it slide in. So this is, again, we got to do some text validation and some error checking real quick, but
Jeez, not gonna lie, this guy goes pretty fast. Also, I don't know UI.
This is what you need to do to pass data. You create the object, configure the data you want to pass. In this case, we're passing the username text field dot text, setting the username and the title, and then you push that VC onto the stack. So one last thing before we test. If you remember, we set our navigation controller is navbar hidden to true, right? Because remember I showed the last video when I went back, it appeared on this search screen. We don't want that. So this is kind of like view controller specific when you hide it and unhide it. If we didn't adjust this on this next screen, the navigation controller would be hidden because that was set on this previous screen. We need to go to the follower list VC. So in view to load, now we want to show the is navbar hidden is true, and we also need to set the background color. View dot background color equals dot system background. Okay, so now again we're showing the view controller, and we set the background color now. So now if we test it, we should go in there. So now if I type my username in, actually it doesn't matter what username I type in because we're not doing any validation, we're not making any network calls, it's going to work. If we hit go, now we push that, and you see the navigation controller up top, we got our back to search sallen0400 because we set the title there, so we're passing our data successfully. If we tap back, we don't see the navigation controller here, we're all good. However, if I hit go again, this is the old way, right? We want to show those large navigation titles.
Right, so mine doesn't work. Wait, get followers works, but
right?
the button doesn't work yet.
If we test it, we should go in there. So now if I type my username in, actually it doesn't matter what username I type in because we're not doing any validation, we're not making any network calls, it's going to work. If we hit go, now we push that, and you see.
But go, the button works, but go doesn't work. What? No. What's happening here? Stop recording. Why am I recording? Delete that. All right, what have I done wrong? What have I done?
Or when they tap Get Followers button. So now let's pass some data in this this function. So first of all, we need to create the follower list VC. Let follower list VC equal capital FOL follower list VC, right? The class type. We're creating a new one. And now we just need to, now that we have the object of the follower list VC, remember our follower list VC now has a username variable.
Well,
so we can
technically
do
I added those and
follower
he
list
didn't.
VC, the lowercase one, right? The local one, dot username, because it has that, equals username text field dot text. Now, if you're astute, you may be saying, oh, we're opened up cases now of this VC. So follower list VC dot title equals username text field dot text, and we got to line these up. And then now the navigation controller that we're already in, we want to push the follower list VC on top of the stack now that we've configured it. So push navigation, or I'm sorry, navigation controller dot push view controller, and this is going to be the follower list VC that we just created, and animated is going to be true. We want to see it slide in.
Right, I have that.
This is, again, we got to do some text validation and some error checking real quick, but for the happy path, this is what you need to do to pass data. You create the object, configure the data you want to pass. In this case, we're passing the username text field.text, setting the username and the title.
Right, the button
and then you push that VC.
Makes sense because it works with this here.
One last thing before we test. If you remember, we set our navigation controller is navbar hidden to true, right? Because remember I showed the last video when I went back, it appeared on this search screen. We don't want that. So this is kind of like view controller specific when you hide it and unhide it. If we didn't adjust this on this next screen, the navigation controller would be hidden because that was set on this previous screen. We need to go to the follower list VC. So in view to load, now we want to show the is navbar hidden is true, and we also need to set the background color. View dot background color equals.
All right, that's fine, system. But let's see what it says here. Four years ago, they were writing this. 4 years. UI gesture recognizer didn't make my keyboard go away. That's not related to me. Let me clean my code and then let's run it again. See what's going on here. So, okay, that works. Why does Go not work? Go is not connected somehow. We need to go back to Go.
still default, so we don't need this. And I did mistype that. We're looking for a return key type. That's what we're looking for. And my space is all messed up now. Placeholder, get back down there. So return.
Oh wait, is it because I put the key? Is it because I put that there? I left it there. Surely not, right? Surely not. No, it's not that. I think there's something not connected
type,
here.
not keyboard type. But again, I left it in. Good learning. Is dot. Now you can see this is what the keyboard return key is going to say. You know, continue, done, emergency call, go, Google, join, next, right? There's a whole bunch of them, route search. We're going to go with go because that's what we want. We wanted to say go. So that is just customizing what the keyboard return key says. We haven't hooked it up yet. That's the next step. Now, in order to take an action when this go button is pressed, the search VC will need to conform to the UI text field delegate. And we're going to talk more about delegates and protocols throughout this course. At a very, very high level, think about a delegate. Like a delegate just sits back and listens, basically. And it's basically,
oh wait,
once
it's here,
listening to
right?
something, like this delegate is going to listen to
what's meant to be in here.
It's going to say like,
I
when
think
this
this is
action
it here.
happens, I will act on this. And in our case, our action is going to be tapping the return key, and then it'll wait for that to happen, and then the view controller will take an action. That's super high level. We're going to get into it more.
Oh,
throughout
push
this course.
followers list meant to be here.
So
I think
this is also a personal preference here is when I
Let's
conform to
go.
a delegate, whether it be the UI table view delegate or scroll view delegate, in this case the text field delegate.
There it is.
I like to put those in extensions. This is just to compartmentalize the code and organize it. Doesn't change the performance at all. It's a personal preference, a code organization thing. So I
But I didn't see him put that in there. Does he actually?
Right,
does he actually do it?
Hey, text field to this text field, if you will. So delegates did tap in here. Again, we're a desk to VC and a little.
Did I miss it?
First of all,
hold on.
And there we go. So this username will be set when we pass the data to it. So now that we have that, let's go back and actually pass the data. So back in our search VC, you can see here, well, first of all, there's two ways to get there, right? They can hit the go button on the keyboard, which we just did, and they can also tap the get followers button. So we have the go path done on the keyboard. Let's actually add a target to the call
go
to action
path
button,
isn't set up,
which will pass the data.
No.
When you add a target, just like we talked up here about the
go pass isn't set up, bro.
Where you have an action, a hashtag selector, we have to pass in a function. So our function is going to be the function that actually passes the data. So let's create that function first. So when we create our button target, we have a function to give it to, and you'll see how that all ties together. So let's create our function up here. And real quick, if you notice that I'm putting these functions up here, it's because I typically like to keep all my UI configuration stuff towards the bottom. Only because most likely when you come back and you're adjusting a screen, most likely you're kind of messing with the logic. You may not be messing with the existing UI, so I like to kind of push that towards the bottom. Again, personal preference thing.
He does not set this up, I swear.
So you're push a little bit. So when I create my button target, you
does he? Did I just miss it?
See, is that the objective C there?
See.
So now we want to add our target
do
to
it?
the button.
Oh,
so
no.
Now in the configure, again, push
target,
the other stuff, but at least you know the call to action button. Push follower list VC is what's going to be called, and text field should.
Oh, frick, he does it.
This push followers VC.
How did I miss that?
Called when user taps go on the keyboard or when they tap get followers button. So now let's pass some data in this this function. So first of all, we need to create the follower list VC. Let follower list VC equal
Damn,
F,
no one has selected Swift.
VC, right? The class type. We're creating a new one.
Everyone is learning something
now
else.
Now that we have the object of the follower list VC, remember our follower list VC now has a username variable. Title on this search screen. We don't want that. Push the follower list VC on top of the stack. That VC controller specific when you hide it in the background color. Now if we test it, we push that and you see
it works.
The navigation controller up top. We got our back to search. sallen0400 because we set the title there, so we're passing our data successfully. If we tap back, we don't see the navigation controller here. We're all good. However, if I hit go again, this is the old way, right? We want to show those large navigation titles, right? So let's do that real quick. That's one line of code. So back to the code here, you do navigation controller .nav navigation bar .prefers.
Is it follower list VC? Yeah. He's so fast, bro. He's so fast. Controller navigation bar prefers large titles. True.
large titles, that is going to be equal to true. So let's run it again real quick, and we should get those nice new in iOS 11. So I guess they're kind of old now. It doesn't matter what I put in here. Hit go.
iOS
Now
11,
we get the nice
so
text here. However, our search is blue. Right? We're kind of going for this green tint, this green hue everywhere. So let's get, we don't want to see the search blue. We want the search to be green, just like the rest of our app. So let's go back and fix that. And because we want all of our navigation bars to do that,
how can you do
we
that?
talked about this with the tab bar, like the appearance thing. So in the scene delegate, we're going to do that. We're going to create a new function here called configure navigation bar. Configure navigation bar. Configure navigation bar. UI navigation bar dot appearance. Remember, when you do dot appearance, that's like overall. So that means all of our UI navigation bars are going to have this. Dot tint color equals dot system
green.
There's too many systems. System green. Wow.
Green.
A lot of autocomplete to get to system green. System green. So now, when we run this, all of our navigation bars are going to have this.
No, he didn't.
Remember, I'm sorry, the navigation controller.
He didn't set it up.
So if remember, we have two navigation controllers, one in the search.
He didn't
and one
use
in the
it.
favorites VC. They're both going to have this because we set it there once. If, haha, I did it before I tested it. I forgot to call configure navigation bar.
Yeah, you did.
So up here in the we'll connect to configure navigation bar. Now let's run it and type in a random username, hit go.
See, he's
now
too fast.
Our search is system green, just like our tab bar. Again, for
I feel like sometimes he doesn't even think.
It's not blue. So we successfully passed the data. Now let's work on kind of cleaning it up, doing that little bit of text validation that we talked about earlier. So let's head back to our search VC, and to do this, we're gonna create a computed property, because what we want to do here is in our past data, right, in this push follower list VC, we want to add a guard statement real quick that basically, just to put this in like normal human speak, is basically said, hey, if our text is valid, right, if there's actually text there, then go ahead and push the follower list VC. So we're going to do a guard statement to do that. So when you use a guard statement, you need kind of a conditional. So we're going to use that computed property to get that conditional, and that is to just real simply see if the user name text field is empty. So to create a computed property, var is username entered, right? You'll see why I named it this way. We'll talk about that in a little bit, because originally I had something like is username empty, but you'll see why I decided to name it like this. It makes it more understandable later on. So to do a computer property, you have to give it a type, and then you do open and close curly braces.
Open and curly.
Function, and then you have to return something for a computer
open and
property.
curly.
So return, and what we're going to return is username text field dot text dot is empty. So what this checks for is like, hey, if the username is empty, this is going to return
text?
that. So this is going to return true if it's empty.
Is empty.
So we don't want is username entered to be true, right? We want the opposite of that. So if we put the exclamation point here, that's going to return the opposite. Now that may seem backwards. Like I said, I did have is username empty. You could go either way on this. This is a small thing. But you'll see why, because I think it reads better at the call site when it just says is username entered in the guard statement. I'd rather have the slightly confusing thing up here than in all the logic of the code. What I like to do real quick too is when there's only like one line for return, just for cleanliness, I like to put these on one line. Again, only when it's relatively simple and straightforward. Okay, so now that we have our conditional to guard against, let's go down into the where we're passing the data, and let's enter this guard statement. So I look at guard statements like a line in the sand. I know that may be an American or US kind of term, but basically what that means is like nothing below this line is going to happen. That's kind of the point of a guard statement, and you'll see how that comes into play here. So I like to do guard is username entered, else return. And for right now, we're just returning. In the next video, we're going to create a custom alert. So you will see, we'll handle errors in here. And actually, let's go ahead and make this 2 lines, because we're going to add a print statement here. And we'll talk about this here in a little bit, because I want to make sure that, hey, this worked. Print no username. So again, back to the naming and why.
What is going on here? Hold on. Else return. Wait, no. Oh yeah, else return, right? Wait, hold on. Is it what? Else return. Why does that look weird? Why is this not? Oh shit. Oh my god. Wait. Hold on. Am I in? Huh? What's going on with the indenting? Ooh, more people doing JavaScript. Nice.
Named it this way. I think because yes, I get it was kind of confusing doing the bang here to make it false or make it like the opposite. I just think it reads better in the code when you say, "Hey, guard is username." Whoops, I wrote this backwards.
I thought there was something wrong with this.
Else that, sorry. Guard is username entered. Okay, if else, then handle the error. If it is entered, cool, move along. And that just reads better to me. Whereas if
There you
if I
go.
name this like is username empty, then I would have to put the bang down here, and now you have to do that mental gymnastics of like, wait, which one is it? I just don't like that. I like to name it nicely at the call site. Again, just a little tidbit there. So let's make sure this is working. So if we run this, we should print no username, and we shouldn't move on to the next screen when we don't enter anything. So let's tap get followers, which is also a test of our button that we haven't tested yet. And okay, so we didn't move on to the next screen, and you can see
No,
in my
we did. We did. Oh, wait, sorry. I'm dumb. I'm supposed to enter nothing. There it is, yeah. What am I thinking?
my printout here, no username. So the guard statement in the computer property is working for some very, very basic text validation. Now, onto the topic of regular expressions, because this is when you get into some like serious text validations, I'm going to include a Swift file, a common string extension that I use for validating emails. Like, right, making sure the email format is right, making sure it has an at symbol, making sure there's a dot something at the end, like a .com, .co, dot something, right? There's email validation. There's also password validation, right? So, hey, my password has to have one uppercase letter, one number, no special characters. There's all kinds of weird password requirements. And as you see these on the screen right here, this is what regular expressions are. You see the string that has looks like a bunch of gibberish, all kind of characters. I think for the
Yeah,
purpose of
what
this
the hell?
video, for somebody who is a junior developer trying to get their first job, you do not have to understand how regular expressions work, right? Like, it still boggles my mind. I mean, like, look at it, like it's ridiculous. However, know that they exist and know how to use them, which you'll see in this string. I'm sorry, the string extension, because you're gonna have to Google every single text validation, and it's just the regular expressions are very, very tricky and difficult. Know that they exist, and they exist for every language. So if you Google something like even a specific password format, you're probably going to find the answer. So again, know it exists, know about it. Take a look at the Swift file for the string extension, practice it, use it. The other kind of validation we could have done here, right? We're checking for a blank username. That's really the only check we're doing. As you see here with this regular expressions, we could have checked to make sure it's a valid format of a GitHub username. However, I didn't go down this path because this gets into some really tricky regular expressions, because here's the constraints for a GitHub username. It has to be alphanumeric. It can have dashes in it, but the dashes can't be consecutive dashes, and it can't begin or end with a dash, and minimum 39 characters. So that's a tricky regular expression. I felt it was beyond the scope of this, but again, I want you to know it exists. And I think the main point here in this take-home project, and when you again get to the second part of the interview where you talk about your take-home project, you know, it does show value even if it's not in your code. If you say, yes, I know that's there, I know how to do that. Yes, I know where to find that. That wraps up this video. What we're going to do in the next video is actually create a reusable custom alert, and we're going to show that alert here when they don't have a username. And I do want to say that like this custom alert is above and beyond. I guarantee you no take-home project is going to expect you to create custom alerts. However, I do feel like it's an interesting topic. I get asked about it a lot, so I want to show you this.
I can make this so easily in Swift.
Custom alert on the take-home project. It'll be impressive. So let's get to that in the next video.
I'm really looking forward to like when we actually refactor this because I want to get into the Swift stuff.
Last video we left off passing some data from the search screen to the follower list screen, that being the username, so we know what to query. And then we also talked about some text validation, ways to do some checking. Here with this guard statement that you see here, is username entered.
So guard statement is username entered. Is username entered. Return empty text is empty. What? I actually don't quite get that. Maybe we should go back real quick and check that out. Double check that text part.
Very tricky. All kind of put the bang down. Is username slightly confusing thing. But to be username text field dot text dot is empty. So what this checks for is like, hey, if the username is empty, this is going to return that. So this is going to return true if it's empty. So we don't want is username entered to be true, right? We want the opposite of that. So if we put the exclamation point here, that's going to return the opposite. Now that may seem backwards. Like I said, I did have is username empty. You could go either way on this. This is a small thing. But you'll see why, because I think it reads better at the call site when it just says is username entered in the guard statement. I'd rather have the slightly confusing thing up here than in all the logic of the code.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Some text validation, ways to do some checking. Here with this guard statement that you see here, is username entered. We just did a print statement. This video is going to be all about creating this custom alert that you see here. And the reason we're doing this now, I know this seems early in the course to be doing something kind of, secondary, but in the next couple of videos, we're going to start talking about our network calls. And
1 second, I need to sort something out with work. 1 second. What the hell? My work app's not loading. There you go. Jeez. All right, I'm going to do a test here. Oh. All right, I need to get a drink. 1 sec. Oh man, thirsty again. Thirsty again. Damn it, I love Mookie. It's so freaking good, bro. Drink this endlessly. Literally, I literally have been drinking it endlessly. All right. Two, three. Wait. 12:30.
I definitely want to have this error ready for when we start handling all the errors with the networking. Like I want to have this ready because we're going to reuse this custom alert all throughout the app. But before we dive into like actually building this thing, let's actually take a step back and talk about like, should you even do this at all? Again, I want to be very clear. A take-home project, 99% of the time, is not going to require you to do custom alerts, right? This is like extra credit
God,
above
everything's
and beyond.
dusty.
But I want to do it because it's a very common topic that I want to teach. But I also want to talk about the trade-offs, not just the take-home project, right? Like take that away. Like just building custom elements in just general development. Like there's always a trade-off. Like as you see with this, custom alert, it looks a lot better than the Apple system alerts, but that comes with the trade-off. Like anytime you build a custom element,
You know what? I'm just gonna quickly go to his main website. I don't. Sean Allen. I don't know if I would actually buy one of this guy's courses. Sean's source code. Update Xcode projects for my current and future iOS dev YouTube tutorials. Wait, what? Up-to-date Xcode projects for my current and future iOS dev YouTube tutorials. Huh? What's that? Widget kit. Wide variety of widgets. SwiftUI, Map Kit, and Cloud Kit. Yeah, see, like he does things sometimes. It's good to hear the way he does it. That's a portfolio piece. SwiftUI Health Kit charts. Charts. I do want charts. Build portfolio project and learn source control with Git and GitHub. Yeah, but the thing is, I don't know. I feel like I don't like his teaching style that much. I don't know whose teaching style I actually like. I think Swiftful Thinking is so far my favorite. But this guy has some good information still. I'm not saying he doesn't. Definitely does.
now you have to maintain it. Now you have to update it. Now you have to constantly make sure it can handle all the different situations that the Apple default system area can already handle, like a cancel button and an OK button, right? So there's trade-offs. Like, is
Let's
this
just go through
alert
this
looking prettier
and
than the system alert worth
get to the
all the
fixes.
maintenance and upkeep that you're gonna have to do throughout the life of the app? That answer may be yes. That answer may be no. The point I want to express to you is that anytime you build a custom element, it comes at a cost. It's up to you to decide if that cost is worth it. Now let's talk about actually building this thing.
Okay.
We're going to break this down. I'm going to switch to a light mode version.
This is going to be a custom alert?
One looks really cool because it's easier for us to break down. Because in the light mode version, you can see the transparent background, right? That is the view controller. We're going to give our view controller a 75% transparent background. The white circle you see, or square, I'm sorry, you see, is a container view, it's just a UI view.
Oh my god, it's absolute
label,
custom.
body label,
Holy
and then a
shit.
GF button that we've already created. So that's the basic structure. We're basically creating one simple view. But we're also going to take the opportunity to create some reusable views that we're going to reuse later on in the app. And that is the GF title label, and then also the GF body label. So we're going to create those custom elements right now. So go over to your GH followers folder, do Command N.
GH followers
Touch class is going to be a UI label, and it's again going to be GF title label. And I like to name these, like I said, generic, rather than like GF
UI label.
Title label. I guess you could do that, but because we're going to reuse this anywhere there's like a title in the app, I want to keep it generic. And go ahead and create it. And again, if you're worried about all these files on the left and how we're going to organize it, we're going to do that in the next video. So we're going to do the typical init stuff. I'm going to go through this a little quicker because this is now the third custom object we've created, and we're going to create a bunch more.
All right.
But we do our typical init, right? Init with frame, super.init, passing the frame of frame. And now we're going to get yelled at, right, for our custom initializer, or required initializer. Again, remember this is like the quote-unquote storyboard initializer. And what we're going to do right away with the GF title label is we're going to create our custom initializer, because sometimes the title label is a line left, Sometimes it's centered, like in this error message. Align left would be the example of the user info screen that you see here. And then also the size. We're going to pass in a font size. This is an example of when we're not going to use dynamic type. So this is kind of like the nuance. I'm going to give you my thought process behind the decision. Whether you agree with it or not, that's fine. Our titles, anything in
Wonder
the
if he
GF
sounds
title label
normal at a lower speed.
is always going to be big and bold. So I'm not worried about dynamic type getting bigger or smaller. We always want it big and bold. On the other hand, when we do the GF body label, like which is in the error message of the alert view, or in our user info view, the
Sounds drunk.
bio, right? That's a lot of text. When it comes to that, I want that to conform to dynamic type. So you can kind of see the nuance of like when to use it, when not to use it. Again, at least in this circumstance. So with that said, the custom initializer, just do
I
init.
think I need this.
We want to pass in a text alignment, because again, we're going to pass in .center or .left, whatever it is. And that is going to be an NS text alignment. You see there. And then we're going to pass in a size. But instead of just size, like, because this is an initializer on the overall label, right? This could mean like, what size is the label? Like, that's kind of confusing. This is where naming
This is the
matters a bit. So I'm
label.
going to call this actually font size, just to be specific, so we know what
Oh,
we're
bro.
passing in. And that is going to be a CG float. And then with the initializers, we do self.text alignment equals text alignment. And remember, the reason I have to do self here is because they're named exactly the same. So if I don't designate this one with self, it doesn't know which one I'm talking about.
Hey?
Another way to fix this is to not name them the exact same thing, but neither here nor there. Oh, I forgot to call the super init. That's right. Super.init with a frame of .0, like we've done before. And then now I want to set the font on my label. So self.font. I don't have to put the self in there, but it looks weird having one with self and one without self. So self.font equals UI font. And again, we're not going to do the preferred font type because that's where we get the dynamic type. We're just going to do system font of size and weight. So the size is going to be the size we pass in, font size. And then the weight, we're going to do dot bold. Here's where you can see you can do heavy, light, medium, regular,
wow.
semi-bold, thin, right?
This
There's a
is
whole bunch of
so
weights you can do.
roundabout,
But we're going to do
sorta.
bold. Again, because we always want our titles to be big and bold. That's the design choice we went with. So now that we have that custom initializer, we need to just write the configure function that we've been writing in the other one. So func configure. And before private, I'm sorry, we got to make this private.
I knew before him.
Because we don't want to call configure
Brother.
again out in the wild, only within this file. So let's make sure we call configure here, and then configure after the custom initializer here. So now let's talk about like how we want to configure our title labels. So the first thing we want to do is set the text color, and that is going to be equals dot label. Remember, dot label is just black on a light screen and white on a dark screen. And then adjust font size to fit width. We do want to set that
Such
to
a
true.
random question.
And again, what this does
How old are
is,
you?
Because our title labels are only going to be one line. So, if it's a super long
I'll put this
username,
guy
for
back at
example,
1.
it'll shrink a little bit to try to fit in that label. And here we can tell it how much we want it to shrink with a minimum scale factor. We're going to do 0.90, 90%. So it'll shrink a little bit, but not too much. And just based on our design, whoops, I got to do 0. You can do 0.9. Tested this out on design. This seems to work. Again, you can scale this however you like to. What I just found is on the big title labels, if you let it go down to like 60 or 70%, then it looks like really, really small and doesn't even look like a title anymore. But again, you can mess with this. And then let's talk about the line break mode. So this is how, if it does,
1 sec.
become too big, how does it break the line? And we're going to do by truncating tail. So what this means is if the username is too long, it's just going to break it off by like ... after it shrinks it down to 90%. There's other ways you can do it by like word wrapping. So if your label was multi-line, this is how you word wrap the label. Again, our title labels are only one line. We don't want to mess with word wrapping, so we're just going to do that. And then do the
whoa!
constraints.
What's with his audio?
Auto masking constraints and equals false. And then we will line these up.
I'm gonna refresh this. Hold on. Something really weird's going on. Do you hear that?
Break the line, and we're going to do by truncating tail. Constantly make sure it can handle all the different situations that the statement. This video is going to be all about creating this.
What's going on with this audio? Hold on. It sounds like a soundboard.
Slightly confusing thing up here than in the actual all the.
Whoa! What? That's so weird. What is happening?
Card statement that you see here is username entered. We just did a print statement. This video is creating this custom alert that
it's like it got messed up when
The reason we're doing this now, I know this seems early in the course to be doing something
used.
Just to be specific, so we know what we're passing. Here's where the good and the bad label. Remember, what I just found is on the big title labels, if you let it go down to like 60
so weird.
or 70%.
Hold on, maybe it's my headphones. Okay.
Really small, and it doesn't even look like a title anymore. But again, you can mess with this. And then let's talk about the line break mode.
Better.
So this is how if it does become too big, how does it break the line? And we're gonna do by truncating task constraints and there's other ways you can do it by like word wrapping. So if your label was multi-line, this is how you word wrap the label. Again, our title labels are only one line. We don't want to mess with word wrapping, so we're just gonna do that. And then do the constraints. Translates auto masking constraints and equals false. And then we will line these up. I'm not gonna line it up all the way with the constraint one because that's like kind of pretty far out there. Again, you don't have to line up your equal signs. It's totally my preference, and I am pretty flexible with it. Which is not consistent. I know, I get it. Anyway, this is our GF title label. So here you go. Again, as you see here in the image, it's going to give us that title that you see in the alert. The next label we're going to build is the GF body label. And again, these are labels that we're going to use throughout the app. So back to the GH followers, Command N. And like I said,
feels
I'm
weird doing this
a little bit on these custom objects because we've done 4 of these now, and we're going to do many more. So you're going to get practice. So GF body label, and here's where the good and the bad, right, comes into play when you do your UI programmatically. So you get a lot of copying and pasting powers, right? When you configure a label and all that stuff via storyboard, you can't really copy and paste that. However, here you can, but with great power comes great responsibility. Copy paste errors are a thing, and they're actually pretty hard to debug. So just be very careful. But we're going to walk through this. So I just copy and pasted our whole title label. We got our override init, that's the same. Our required init is the same, that's the storyboard. Our custom initializer is going to be different because our body text label is going to use dynamic type. So we're not going to pass in a font size because we're going to use the preferred font that you'll see. We'll get to it in a second. So just remove this font here that we are no longer passing in. We still want to pass in a text alignment because again, as you can see on this custom alert, it's a center alignment. In our bio on the user info screen, it's a line left. So we definitely want to pass in a text alignment when we configure this label. Now if we go down to the configure, our text color is not .label, right? As you see in the alert, it's like a gray, light gray. Well, there's a color called secondary label, which is going to be this light gray. And again, if you want to see where I got those, remember that Semantic UI app. I love that app. Definitely put it on your phone. Like I said, you're going to use it a ton. We want to adjust the content size to fit width for sure. We want to be a little more forgiving with our body text because, right, like as you see, there's a lot more text here. So I'm going to take this down, let it go down to 75% of the size to make sure it fits. Line break mode is going to be by word wrapping, right? Because we're not just going to truncate the tail, we're actually going to wrap it around. And you're going to notice I'm not actually setting the number of lines. You may have done this in storyboard where you set the number of lines to a label to 0 or to maybe 5 to set that. I'm actually going to save that bit of configuration for when I actually use the label because, depending on the situation, it could be different. I don't want to always hard code my body labels to always be 4 lines of text, right? You don't know when you're going to use these. So By not including that in this configure, I can configure that again in the view controller. But it's better to configure one little thing than all of this. So the last thing we need to do in this configure after we kind of adjusted all the existing ones is to put the font. Remember we had the font for the text label up here? Well, now we're going to do font equals UI font. Now we're going to go back to the preferred font for text style, right? This is where we're getting that dynamic type. And there is a text style called body. Imagine that. So that is going to be the size that you see. Again, the Semantic UI app will show you that. So now we have our body label. Back to the design. Now we have our title label, we have our body label, and we have our GF button. Like, we're ready to go.
Okay.
So we need to create the view controller, because again, the alert is going to be a view controller that's presented. So do Command N on your GitHub followers folder, Cocoa Touch class, back to a UI view controller. And this is going to be the GF alert. If I can't type, alert VC. Hit next, create, add it to the title files. Again, we're going to fix it. And delete all the comments as usual. Now back to kind of some of the other screens we built. I like to initialize my objects in order. And the first thing we want is that white container view. Well, at least in light mode, it's white. So let container view, and this is just going to be a normal UI view. I haven't made because obviously this is the only place we use it, but I haven't made a reusable container view yet, like a GF alert container view. That is something I'm going to leave if you choose to kind of take it on your own and build that. Because one of the feedback I've gotten early in the course is they would love some homework, a little bit exercises, some extra stuff for you to do on your own. So I'm going to try to start, sprinkling that in throughout the videos here. And this is an example of one of them. So now we want the title label. Again, I like to go top to bottom. So let
I'm not even going to attempt that.
Equal GF title label that we just created. And we're going to initialize this with the text alignment. Text alignment is .center. And the font size is 20. Now remember, I've already like dialed these numbers in. It did take some trial and error to find out what numbers worked best. Wait.
Title label equals GF title label. Hold on. What's going on here? Equals. There you
go. Body, yeah, we'll say message label. Like error message is probably a better way. Message label equal GF body label, and again, text alignment .center. And then now the button. So let action button. Again, I like the generic names there instead of like the OK button or something like that, because again, the name can change. Equals GF button, again with our custom initializer. This time the color is going to be .system pink. I know it looks red, but I just like the way the system pink looks. It kind of looks red. Anyway, and then the title string is going to be OK. We're actually going to create a custom initializer on this where we pass in the title. So that's just kind of hard-coded in there for now. So you can see we have our UI elements. We're going to go down later to actually, do all the constraints like we did with the search VC. But first, because of that custom initializer that I talked about, right? Because when we initialize this alert and call this from any view controller, right? Because you imagine any view controller should be able to show an error. We're going to pass in what the title should be, what the message should be, and what the button should say. That's going to happen at the call site. So because of that, I'm going to need those variables. For example, var, I can't just call it title because every view controller has a title, right? That's what shows up in the nav bar. So we're going to call this alert title, and it's going to be a string. And then we need a var message. That is also a string, not a sting.
Mm-hmm.
And then var button title. That's also a string.
He's making these
custom init. So just like the other objects, init, we want to pass in a title, which is a string. We want to pass in a message, which is a string, and then a button title, which is a string. And we got to call the super, so super.init. And when you're initializing these view controllers programmatically like this, you need it doesn't have a nib, and there's no nib in the bundle. So now we
wait. Hold on. What's going on here? It's double. I don't know what this is. Hold on.
do custom init. So just like the other objects, init, we want to pass in a title, which is a string. We want to pass in a message, which is a string,
Yeah.
and a button title, which is a
string.
String.
And
we got to call the super, so super.init. And when you're initializing these view controllers programmatically like this, you need it doesn't have a nib, and there's no nib in the bundle. So now we set these variables to what we passed in. Just again, similar to our other custom initializers. So self.alert title equals title. Self.message equals message. And self.button title equals button title.
Wait. He's using these.
And we line these up because that's what we do. Okay, so now that we have our initializer, that's all done and good to go. Okay, we need our required init for the storyboard init. Yep, got it. And give us 2 spaces here.
Ooh. Huh? Oh, hold on. This goes up here, actually. My bad. That's why it was messed up, I think. Yeah. So these, it's setting it up so these will equal this as in the init. So when it starts, it will do that. So alert title is a string, and when this initializes, we're gonna have to put in a string with the initializer, which will be title, and that will go into alert title. Okay.
Now we're ready to start kind of laying out the UI. The first thing we need to do in view to load is set the view background color. Again, if you look at the design, you can see that the background view is a black, but it's at a 75% opacity. So we need to do view.background color. And again, another little bit of homework for you. If you want to put this color into a constant, you'll see how we do that later in the course. You can do that. This was the only instance of this color, so I just went ahead and initialized it just as a UI color. But again, you never know. You might want to reuse it. So this is just 0, 0, 0, black is 0, and then the opacity is 0.75. So that's what's going to give us that 75% alpha, opacity, same thing. So that's what we're doing there. And now we can start configuring the elements on the screen individually, just like we did with the search VC. So again, we're going to start with the container view, the white square that holds everything, because that is going to go in the view controller, but the title label, the body label, the button, that's actually going to go into the container view, and you'll see how we do that. Because before we've been pinning everything to the view, so now we're going to kind of get some hierarchy.
Oh, someone's actually learning Swift.
Configure.
Oh my God.
Container.
No way.
View. And again, this is the opportunity if you would like to create a GF alert container view and refactor that all, so you have it, similar to this. That's the homework should you choose to do it. And you're going to see me kind of lay out some of the stuff in here, and you can kind of see why I like to refactor those out, because it gets a lot of this configuration code out of your view controller. So what's the first thing we do? You remember? We got to add the subview. Don't forget this. I guarantee you're going to do it. View.add subview is going to be the container view. And now we're going to start breaking down the corner radius and then the border. So container view, actually, container view dot layer dot corner radius equals 16. And again, these are numbers I've dialed in. Container view dot layer.
Hold on, where? Oh yeah, okay. Right, so this is gonna initialize an actual view, I guess.
Dot border width equals 2. And the reason this has a border, like look on the white version, like you don't see the border because the border color is going to be white. But what happened is because the black transparency on dark mode and then like the black background like it blended in too much. So we're giving this a white border. So in dark mode, the alert really pops against the black background as you see here in the design. So container view dot layer dot border color equals, remember we have to do the full UI color dot white dot CG color for core graphics. This is because we're dealing with the layer of the view. It's kind of like a level down. And then lastly, we do the container view dot translate auto whatever into false. It's a mouthful. So we do that into false there, and then line these up. So
that's pretty funny.
That is our UI for the container view. Now let's start doing the constraints for the container view. And then I forgot the background color. Container view dot background color equals, and again it's going to be dot system background, right? Because we want it to be white in light mode and black in dark mode.
Okay.
So now that we have the UI all set up,
how does he line those up anyway? Like, do you just have to tab? Oh yeah. But what about this one? Does he just ignore that? And also tab didn't work with that. No, I don't like it. It's unnecessary.
If you were to refactor this, all this functionality here would be refactored out into your GF alert container view, if you choose to call it that. And then you would just get right into the constraints, which we're going to do now. So remember ns layout constraint dot activate, and we pass in an array of constraints. Which again, remember the rule of thumb is we want to do about 4 constraints per item. Again, that's a rule of thumb. There are some exceptions. So let's think about this. Look at this design here, and let's see how we want to position this. So looking at this, we know we want it dead center of the screen, so let's take care of that first. So container view dot center y anchor dot constraint is going to be equal to view dot center y anchor. So again, we're centering it vertically. We do the same thing horizontally. Container view dot center x anchor dot constraint equal to view dot center x anchor. So again, now we're centered vertically and horizontally. And now we're going to give it a hard-coded height and width. So container view dot height, or we'll do width first. Width, can't do that. Width anchor dot constraint equal to, and this is going to be 280. Again, I've dialed in these numbers. Now remember, the smallest width is going to be 320 on the iPhone SE. Remember we talked about the kind of the diagrams. But it's just an error message. Like you never really want it to span the entire width. Like imagine like the big wide iPhone X Plus. You know me and my naming. You don't want it to span that. So
X Plus?
Having a hard-coded height and width here is good. And to be fair, you probably could go above and beyond.
What is this? It's a random expense on my account or something. How's that? It's not there right now. So weird. Okay. Strange. Very strange.
To really make this custom and have the height kind of adapt to the height of the error message. But ideally, your error messages shouldn't be like a paragraph long, like, right? They should be very short and concise. Yeah. But that would be one way you can take this, more above and beyond. Constraint equal to, and then height is 220. Again, I've dialed
220, okay.
So now let's just call configure container view. That's the first element. So now from here on out, we are going to put the title label, the body label, and the button inside
what do I call
the
that?
container.
Configure.
So let's do the title label. Same thing. Func.configure title label. And then remember, we want to add the subview, except this time we're not adding it to the view, right? We're adding the subview.
Maybe this isn't meant to be private.
So there's some view hierarchy stuff you got to worry about here. So we're going to do container view dot add subview, and that is going to be title label. So now little curveball, gets a little trickier. And then all the UI is configured, right? We did that in the subclass of the GF title label. So now we just need to set what the actual text is. So title label dot text equals, it's going to be what? Alert title. Remember, this is what we passed in. And if for some reason, right, this is an optional, maybe for some reason they don't use this custom initializer, they use another initializer, we can put at least a default setting in there. So we're going to do alert title, and then the double question mark is called nil coalescing. It's another way to unwrap optionals. Basically what this says is use alert title. If alert title is nil, use this, and you give it a default value. So this would be a blank string. We're just going to type in something went wrong. So when this alert shows up, like something went wrong, right? So this is kind of like our default backup title, if need be. But we want to, hopefully it's always going to use the alert title. That's the plan anyway. So that's it for UI alignment. Now let's get into the constraints. So let's do
here we go.
Layout constraint dot activate. Again, we're passing in the array. I like to use four items here. So we're going to pin it to the top here. Title label dot top anchor dot constraint is now it's equal to, we want to pass in a constant here. So it's going to be equal to, again, this is where we were normally pinning it to like the view, but now we're pinning it to the container view. So again, if you've done your layout in Storyboard, you're doing the same thing. Just like when you're pinning stuff in Storyboard, you're just typing it out.
Oh my god, this is so tedious
so we want to make
compared to
this
Swift.
To container view
top
anchor, and we want to give it a constant of 20. Again, I've dialed in these numbers. So title label dot leading anchor dot constraint is equal to container view dot leading anchor and the constant of 20.
Wait. Container view dot top anchor. Okay. Oh yeah, we're using the container view. This view 20. Title label dot leading anchor. Yeah. Okay.
Title label dot trailing anchor dot constraint. Again, that and container view dot trailing anchor, and then remember trailing we'll do negative 20. Now we're going to do something real quick after we do in the height. So again, we got a pin to the top, we got a pin to the sizes, so we got our x coordinate and our width. Now we just need a height, and we're going to just hard code the height because again, the title label is just one line. We know our font size is 20.
Not going to be 20, was it going to be 50?
Just give ourselves a little bit of padding, but for the most part, we're going to hard code it. So title label dot height anchor dot constraint is equal to constant 28.
28.
Now you're going to notice here, we have a style going on in this alert. We're 20 from the top, 20 from the left, 20 from the right or the trailing. And we're going to do that with all of our elements. It's kind of like padding. If you've ever built like a website in HTML and CSS, right? You have certain padding values. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a variable. We're going to say let padding equal, padding, it's got to be, you got to tell it it's a CG float, equals 20. So now I have this variable called padding, a constant that I'm just going to pass in. And the benefit here is, say we want to change our design. We want to change this padding to like 10, right? We want to make it smaller. Well, instead of changing, because you're going to see we're going to use this 20 padding like a lot. Instead of changing that in 9 different places, you just come up and change this padding variable right there to whatever you need. And you can quickly tweak your design. So now you're going to see we're going to have padding, and we're going to be reusing this in the other elements.
Negative padding?
Now this one, remember, is negative padding. Be sure to keep the negative there.
Didn't know you do that.
Big one. So now we have our title label. And if we do that, let's go configure title label. So if you see what we've done, we've placed the container view in the view controller. And now we've placed our title label in the container view pinned to the top. So now I'm actually going to...
Hold on. Why can't I configure... Wait, what? Ooh, configured configure. Holy shit, I did that before. Oh my god.
Mix it up a little bit. I know I said I like to go top to bottom, so after title label should be body label. But however, if you look at the design, like we know that the title label is always pinned to the top. We know we want our button to always be kind of pinned to the bottom with the padding. So that just leaves the space in between. So what I want to do is I want to pin the button to the bottom and then have the body label just fill up the space in between those. Now, the thing with programmatic UI, like the order matters. So if I tried to add my body label and configure all the constraints right now and then do my button, like I would get an error because I'm trying to configure my body label to a button that hasn't been configured yet. So the order in which your constraints are applied matters. And because of that, we need to configure the button next because we're going to
do some stretching in a sec.
So func configure action button. And again, more of the same. We have to do container view dot add subview action button. Remember I said we're going to get a lot of practice at constraints? Well, here we are. And we got to give our button its title. So action button dot set title. And now it's going to be button title, right? That's what we passed in the custom initializer up here. So the button title, and again, we're going to use no coalescing. So again, the backup is okay. And that is going to be for control state normal. And then we got to give our button a target, right? Because what happens when you tap the button? Well, all of our errors, again, this is just kind of the basic alert, right? We don't have the functionality to have like, a cancel, an OK button to do like different actions. Our OK button is just going to be to dismiss the error. Like we're going to show the error, like okay, I know, hit OK. Again, this is what I talked about at the cost of creating the custom stuff. Because when you use the default Apple one, you get all that like done, cancel, all the customization of that alert. It's already built in with Apple. You don't have to build your own. So again, is the nice looking alert worth the cost for you to decide? So we have to give this a title, or I'm sorry, a action or a target. Action button dot set or add target. This is adding an action. It's going to be self hashtag selector, and then you see we need that obj Odell Beckham Objective C method again. So we're gonna write that real quick down here. It's going to be dismiss VC, because it's just gonna, when you hit OK, it's just gonna dismiss this view controller. And then this looks a bit redundant, I get it, but we want to do this because we want to pass in animated is true, and then we don't need the completion handler here, so we're not doing this. The reason I have animated is true is because here later on we're going to implement how this view shows up.
So this is how dismiss works in UIKit.
A modal that slides up, we're just going to make this appear. Well, we want it to be animated, and we're going to do this like cross dissolve animation, so it looks like it fades in. So we definitely want to see this animation here. So I call dismiss VC there, and then this is for for .touch up inside. Okay, so that is our targets on the. Oh, whoops. Yep. See, there's the error. I got to do @objc, and there we go. So now we are ready for our constraints on the button. So ns layout constraint dot activate. And again, we're going to start with the bottom because that's where we're pinning it to. So action button dot bottom anchor dot.
Hold on. This error doesn't want to go. Oh, right. There you go.
Constraint. It's equal to that and a constant. So that's equal to container view dot bottom. And then the float is going to be negative padding, right? Remember I say we're going to be using this padding a lot. We're also going to use this on the trailing and leading for the button as well. So action button dot leading anchor dot constraint equal to container.
Hold on, I auto filled the wrong one here. Here you go.
View dot leading and then it's going to be padding. Right now you can see why when I just go and change the padding up top, if I want to adjust it a little bit, it's all going to work out there. Oh, need a comma. Again, these are an array you're passing
But
in, so make sure you have
everything's
those
going to
commas.
adjust. I don't
Action
know.
button dot trailing
That's
anchor dot constraint.
Depends what you're using it for, I
Equal
guess.
to, I don't know why that moves around sometimes. Container view dot trailing, and remember it's negative padding. And then now we got to give the button a height. Action button dot height anchor dot constraint equal to 44. All right, you feel like you're getting enough practice on these constraints now? It is tedious, I know, when you do the whole layout, but I'm starting to really like the programmatic layout. Even though my projects are still a mix of storyboard and UI, I don't know, I like doing them both. So now we have our action button. Let's be sure we call that configure action button. And now let's do the body label, the final piece of the puzzle here. So func configure body label container view dot add subview, and that is going to be body label. I'm sorry, message label. Message label. We do need to do a little bit of configuration here by setting the number of lines. Remember I talked about that, how I want to do that at the call site because every situation is going to be different. First, let's set the text here. Message label.text. Again, same thing what we did before. If we want it to be message, or give it a default value of unable to complete request. It is a generic message to the user, but it's better than sending them.
Hold on, where's message? Is that here? Message equals message. Message label is equal to message. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Nothing or having it crash, right? Now we do the message label, like I was saying, number of lines, that number of lines, and I'm going to set that equal to 4. Because again, I know I've written my error messages, so like they're not super long. Okay, so that is it for the UI configuration of the message label. Back to the UI and the constraints. So ns layout constraint dot activate.
Fuck it, I'm copying this.
And we get 4 constraints here. And so we want to pin this to the bottom of the title label.
Jesus.
And then also the top of the button, and then the leading and trailing edges of the content view. So message label dot top anchor dot constraint is this one equal to title label dot bottom anchor, and then the constant is going to be 8. Again, I've dialed these in. Message label dot leading anchor dot constraint is equal to that, and is going to be equal to the container view dot leading anchor, and there's going to be padding, right? We want that 20 padding all around. Message label dot trailing anchor dot constraint. Nope. See, I picked the wrong one. That's what I said. I wish the default auto completion, it moves around. That's kind of
it does move.
Container view dot leading anchor equals negative padding. I'm sorry, this is trailing anchor. Yes. Again, sometimes when you're doing so many of these constraints, like you can do those typos like that because it's very repetitive and tedious. And by the way, there are like third-party libraries out there like SnapKit or Tiny Constraints that make this less tedious. But again, we're going no third-party libraries. So again, we're pinned to the top, we're pinned to the edges. Now we need to pin to the top of the button. So message label dot.
You know what? I wonder if you could set up like a layout constraint setting where you could like input the value here, you could input, and then like you'd initialize this you would have to input and on initialization, and then you could on input you'd obviously initialize this section, and then initialize that, but you could literally just type the short init, and it would come up with all the things that you would need to enter. I wonder if some people have done that.
Anchor dot constraint equal to, sorry, it's always tricky picking the right one. Action button dot top anchor, right? Because we're pinning it to the top of the action button. And again, -12 when you're dealing with the, or negative when you're dealing with the bottom anchor, and 12 is the number that I have dialed in. And now if we call configure action button, I'm sorry, body label, or what do we call it? That should be configure message label.
Yes, it should, and I did that already.
It's called
You
the body
fool.
label, but this is a message label. I got confused there.
Fool!
And make sure the naming is on point. Message label.
Let's run it and see what happens.
General UI,
I don't know what it's gonna do, but
now we need to figure out like how are we gonna call this. So like I said before,
we're not even calling anything.
But we want to do this on every view controller. So this is where an extension on UI view controller comes into play. This is going to be our first extension. And sometimes you want to subclass something, like sometimes you want to create a special type of view controller that has certain behaviors. That would be a subclass. However, when you have a behavior that you want on every view controller or anything, like maybe every button.
Hey, this is a message alert. What am I thinking? What am I doing?
Then you make an extension on UI button.
Where's
my
logic?
That's the difference between like extensions and subclassing. A subclass is more for a specific subset of buttons you want to have.
All right, one sec. I have to do one more thing for work here. I'm kind of what's the word? Limit testing with my work right now. Yeah, I might have effed it up, but
an extension is when you want all UI buttons to have a behavior. So again, GH followers folder, Command N, add it to the stack of files here. We're just gonna do a Swift file.
I thought this video was the one meant to be the one where you organize it. Is he not now?
Call this button. So that's the difference. So again, make sure the naming is on point. Message label. So we have the general UI all set up. Now we need to figure out like how are we going to call this? So like I said before, we're going to be using this custom initializer, but we want to do this on every view controller. So this is where an extension on UI view controller comes into play. This is going to be our first extension. And sometimes you want to subclass something, like sometimes you want to.
No, we already had an extension.
Type of view controller that has certain behaviors. That would be a subclass. However, when you have a behavior that you want on every view controller or anything, like maybe every button you want to have this.
He's losing it.
Then you make an extension on UI button. So that's the difference between like extensions and subclassing. A subclass is more for a specific subset of buttons you want to have a behavior. An extension is when you want all UI buttons to have a behavior. So again, GH followers folder, Command N, add it to the stack of files here.
Swift file, yes, finally.
Call this UI view controller. So what I do here for my extensions is I type out the full name of the type, and then I do a plus and then ext. So I know this is my UI view controller extension.
Okay.
Pile of files, like I said.
Interesting.
So we're going to import UIKit. And by the way, importing UIKit also imports Foundation. So if you find yourself importing Foundation and UIKit, it's redundant. I used to do that all the time. So now we want to do an extension on UI view controller. So we'll create that. And now we're going to put in the behavior to show this alert controller. So now in the view controller, I can just call this function and it will show the alert. Okay, we're going to call present because remember this is modally, we're presenting it. If it was like a navigation controller, would be like pushing it. So present GF alert on main thread. This is going to be the key here. On main thread. We're going to talk about threading more when we get to the our networking calls, but this is a big deal because oftentimes you're calling these alerts, again, back to the network calls.
The hell does this do?
When you go to make this call, you're calling it from the background thread, and it's illegal to present a UI element from the background thread. So if I didn't put this actually in the function call here, whenever if I just called this present GF alert and we didn't do it on the main thread here, every time I called this, which again, when we're showing errors, is like every script.
Is this not meant to be a func?
And like moving it to
What's
the main
wrong with
thread.
them?
And that gets annoying. So we're going to actually just do it here. So it's always going to be presented on the main thread. And again, if you're not familiar with main thread and background thread,
wait, what is he doing?
That when we do our networking. And like I said, when we present,
I actually don't know. Oh shit.
Title, which is a string. The message.
Wait, what? Is this meant to be a function? It is meant to be a function. Bro. You forget things all the time.
Is a string and the button title. This way we have complete control over what we show on our alert, like when we present it at the call site. So here's where we're going to wrap this to put it on the main thread. So dispatch queue, man, call it a function, right? It's kind of tricky to like talk and type at the same time. Anyway, dispatch queue dot main dot async. This is a quick way to throw things onto the main thread. Like I said, if I didn't do this here, I would have to call this every time I called this function, which is a lot with all the error handling. So now this is actually very similar to when we passed data in the last video. So we create the view controller. So let alert VC equal a GF alert VC. And if you see we do the initializer here, we get our custom initializer that we created where we pass in a title string, all that stuff. And we're just going to pass through what we passed here originally. So this is going to be title, message, and button title. So we're just passing it through.
This is really deep.
Now we've created the alert VC. Now we need to configure it. Alert VC dot present. I'm sorry, modal presentation style. Modal presentation style equals dot, and you can see this is how you can present this. We're going to do over full screen. And you see here it says a view presentation style in which it's presented. The presented view covers the screen.
Okay.
We're doing that so it doesn't show like the card view, especially in iOS 13. And now we need to do alert vc.modal transition style. Now here's the animation, right? You know how like we'll do this here. Cross vertical, cross dissolve, flip horizontal, partial curl. There's a couple different types. We want to do cross dissolve. So this is going to make it look like so it like fades in, right? It's not just going to flash on the screen. The alert is going to have a quick fade in when we show it. It's a lot smoother that way. And then again, very similar to how we passed the data before. Now we're going to call, instead of navigation controller dot push like we did in the last video, we're going to do just present, and then you pass in a view controller to present, which is the alert VC. And animated is true because we want to see that cross dissolve animation. And then we can just get rid of the completion handler because we're not doing anything once it completes. So now every view controller, self, because we're in a closure here. And by the way, these GCD closures and stuff like that, you don't have to do the capture list, the weak self. We're going to get into that whole weak self here later. But these GCD ones and the UIView.animate closures, you don't have to do the weak self stuff 99% of the time. There's always edge cases. But so now any view controller can just call present GF alert on main thread. You pass in the title, you pass in the message, you pass in the button title, and you're good to go. So let's see this thing in action, right? We've coded a lot. We haven't seen anything. So back to our search VC, right, where we had this print no username. So what we're doing here is when we press go or get followers, we want to check to make sure is username entered. And if username is not entered, instead of printing no username, we're just going to call present GF alert on main thread. The title is going to be empty username. And the message is going to be, please enter a username. We need to know who to look for. Smiley face emoji. By the way, Command Control Spacebar will pull up your emoji keyboard. And there we go. You don't have to do that, obviously. We're just going to have a little fun. And then the button title, again, is going to be OK. So now that will present our alert. So let's test it. We're going to run it on the iPhone 11. All right, here we go. I'm going to tap get followers when I have an empty username. And you see there's our alert. Please enter username. We need to know who to look for. Okay, now let's test it on dark mode real quick. Side note, if you didn't know, when your app is running, if you click this little control thing, environment overrides, click on that, you're going to see you can change it to dark mode on the fly. You can switch between light and dark. So we want to go back to dark mode. So let's pull back our simulator. Now we're in dark mode. So now you can see what our alert looks like in dark mode.
And I think
again, we're going
I got it.
Get followers.
Killed it.
Let me move this over here now.
Let me
now you see that white.
Get it off my hand. Where are these bugs coming from? Bro, these bugs, man. Bugman? All right.
Border. So you see what I was talking about. If we didn't have that white border, that error message.
Let's see if that white border comes up. How do we swap it again? Where was it? Toggle appearance, right? Yeah. Yes. Does it come up when I do this? No. Oh wait, hold on. What am I thinking? Hold on. Does it come up if I? No. Oh yeah, it does. Nice. Haha.
Would really blend in with that, black transparency background. So we put that white border on there to make it really pop in dark mode. I really like the way that looks. So again, please enter username. We need to know who to look for. And you can see how the colors and the label all configure in dark mode automatically. And then again, remember when you tap OK, that calls that dismiss view controller. You saw it do that, watch it like slowly animate in, that slow cross dissolve out. If we didn't have that cross dissolve modal transition style, it would just flash away and flash on. Pretty jarring. So we wanted to slowly fade away. But that's it. That's our custom alert. You're looking at it. Like I said, we're going to use this a lot throughout the rest of the app. I wanted to get this in place before we did our networking because we're going to use it a lot in the networking stuff. So on to the next
He didn't
video
organize
where
this.
we kind of organize these files.
Really? For real? Okay, here we go. Actually, it's happening.
Last video we created our custom
Holy
alert
shit!
view
All right,
control.
I've done quite a few of these, and I've been on here for freaking 3 hours. So I'm gonna take a break. I might be back a little bit later today, but yeah, I'm just gonna take a break for now. Do some stretching. Get another drink. Make my way to the toilet because I really have to go right now, and I've drank too much. Oh no! Jesus. Oh my God. There we go. Okay. So I'll catch you guys in my next video, I guess, if you want to come around. Yeah. See you there. Thanks for joining. Bye.